The Montana winter roared with ancient fury across the Bitterroot Range, a white hurricane that consumed the world in its cold embrace. Through the swirling maelstrom of snow, Horizon Outpost stood as a defiant outpost of humanity, a collection of reinforced cabins and shooting ranges nestled against the unforgiving mountainside. In the main observation tower, James Ironman Blackwood lowered his high-powered binoculars, his weathered face hardening as he spotted the faint movement on the ridge 2 miles away. At 65, Blackwood's body carried the scars of nearly 4 decades of service to his country. His steel-gray hair remained in the same military cut he'd worn since 1978, and his posture betrayed nothing of the 2 bullets he still carried near his spine, souvenirs from an extraction gone wrong in Kandahar. The cold bit at his face, but he barely noticed. Cold had been a companion for much of his operational life, from the Arctic training with Norwegian Special Forces to the brutal mountain passes of Afghanistan during the Soviet War. Behind him, the young recruit, a former Army Ranger with promise, was adjusting the scope on a custom M40A7 sniper rifle, a weapon Blackwood had personally modified for extreme range performance. "Sir, I've compensated for the crosswind, but the barometric pressure readings are fluctuating with the storm front," the recruit said, his breath visible in the frigid air of the observation platform. Blackwood's eyes remained fixed on the distant ridge where the shadows had moved. His instincts, honed through decades as a SEAL team sniper and later as a black operations specialist, screamed danger. The movement was too deliberate, too coordinated. These weren't locals or hunters lost in the storm. "Get inside," Blackwood ordered, his voice carrying the natural authority that had once commanded America's most elite warriors. "Secure the armory and activate Protocol November." As the recruit hurried to comply, Blackwood raised his binoculars again, confirming his suspicions. Through the specialized thermal imaging system, he could make out the heat signatures of at least 6 figures moving in a tactical formation that he recognized all too well. Delta Force, or something very much like it. His mind calculated ranges, sight lines, and defensive positions with the automatic precision that had made him a legend in circles, where such legends remained unspoken. The observation post offered a commanding view of the valley approach, but with the storm intensifying, effective engagement range would be severely limited. "In 40 years, I've never seen anyone make a shot at that distance," he muttered to himself, measuring the space between his position and the approaching team. But today, we might not have a choice. Horizon Outpost hadn't always been Blackwood's sanctuary. After retiring from Naval Special Warfare Command in 2015, he had initially attempted to integrate back into civilian society. He bought a small house in Virginia, tried consulting work with defense contractors, even dated a widow he met at a veterans function. But the shadows of his past refused to release their grip on his soul. The nightmares came nightly, vivid recreations of the 1991 operation in northern Iraq, where 3 of his teammates died because intelligence was compromised. The faces of Johnson, Rodriguez, and Chen haunted him, their eyes accusing in death as they had never been in life. Civilian existence felt like a charade, a world built on the luxury of ignorance that men like him had purchased with blood and silence. So when a former SEAL commander offered him the chance to establish a remote training facility for specialized marksmanship, Blackwood seized the opportunity. Horizon Outpost began as a legitimate enterprise, providing advanced sniper training to special operations personnel from allied nations. But over time, it evolved into something else, a gathering place for operators who existed in the Shadowlands between official missions and deniable operations. Men and women who carried out the tasks that America needed done but couldn't acknowledge. Blackwood's reputation preceded him. During the Soviet-Afghan War, he had been the phantom that Soviet commanders warned their troops about, the American ghost who could kill from distances their countermeasures couldn't defend against. Later, during Desert Storm, his 27 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters set records that remain classified. The younger generation of special operators knew him only as Iron Man, a name earned not for any flashy technology, but for his unnatural ability to remain absolutely motionless in a sniper hide for days at a time, his heartbeat slowed to barely 40 beats per minute through sheer force of will. Now, as he descended from the observation tower to the main compound, memories of past operations flickered through his mind like old film footage. nights spent in the Hindu Kush waiting for Soviet patrols, the 3 days he'd remained in position outside a terrorist compound in Yemen, the impossible shot in Colombia that had decapitated the Cali cartel's leadership. Different wars, different enemies, but always the same mission: protecting American interests from threats that the public would never fully comprehend. The main building of Horizon Outpost reflected Blackwood's personality: austere, functional, and meticulously organized. Reinforced concrete walls disguised as rustic timber offered protection against both the elements and potential hostiles. The interior featured state-of-the-art communications equipment, weapons storage, and a war room where operations could be planned with the same precision as any military command center. On the walls hung mementos of a lifetime of service: a faded photograph of SEAL Team 6 from 1987, a Soviet officer's cap taken as a trophy in Afghanistan, a folded flag presented at the funeral of his closest friend. But unlike the I Love Me walls of many retired operators, there were no medals, no certificates of commendation. Blackwood's most significant achievements remained classified, acknowledged only in closed-door meetings at Langley and the Pentagon. As he entered the secure communications room, the young recruit was already initiating Protocol November, a complete communications blackout and defensive posture designed for situations when unwelcome visitors might arrive. Blackwood checked the perimeter security feeds, noting with approval that the automated systems were functioning despite the storm's interference. "Sir, defensive measures are active. Armory is secured," the recruit reported, his training evident in his calm efficiency despite the sudden crisis. Blackwood nodded, his mind already mapping out contingencies. "Begin evacuation procedure for the other instructors and trainees. Use the northern tunnel system. I'll handle our visitors." "You think it's a government team, sir?" The recruit's question carried the unspoken implication: would they be fighting against their own? Blackwood's expression remained unreadable. "Whoever they are, they came unannounced in a blizzard using tactical approach vectors. That makes them hostile until proven otherwise." He paused, checking the loading on his sidearm, a customized M1911 that had been with him since the Gulf War. "But if you're asking if I think they have official sanction, no, this isn't how the government officially comes knocking." The young man nodded, accepting the assessment from a man who had forgotten more about clandestine operations than most would ever learn. As he turned to carry out his orders, a proximity alarm sounded, not from the direction of the approaching team, but from the eastern perimeter where the service road connected to the main highway 15 miles away. Blackwood moved to the monitoring station, switching the feed to the eastern approach cameras. Through the swirling snow, he could make out a single figure struggling against the storm, moving with the determined gait of someone for whom failure wasn't an option. As the camera zoomed in, he saw it was a woman, her form hunched against the brutal wind, one arm clutching what appeared to be a wound on her side. "Proximity alert on the access road," the recruit reported unnecessarily. "I see it," Blackwood replied, his tactical mind already calculating probabilities. A diversion sent ahead of the main force? Unlikely, too obvious, and the approaching team was still too far out. A coincidence? In his world, coincidences were rarer than honest politicians. "Continue the evacuation," he ordered. "I'll handle our unexpected guest." The storm had intensified to near whiteout conditions by the time Blackwood reached the eastern perimeter gate. Through the specialized thermal scope of his rifle, he tracked the approaching figure, definitely female, moving with the disciplined efficiency of someone with military training despite an obvious injury. Not a lost hiker or stranded motorist then. When she was within 50 yards of the gate, Blackwood activated the external speaker system. "That's far enough," his voice carried through the howling wind. "Identify yourself and state your business." The woman stopped, her head lifting to scan for the source of the voice with the practiced sweep of someone accustomed to threat assessment. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she called back, her voice steady despite her obvious physical distress. "I need to speak with James Blackwood. It's about Project Longbow." Blackwood felt a cold that had nothing to do with the Montana winter seep into his bones. Project Longbow was a designation he hadn't heard in over 15 years, a highly classified initiative he'd been tangentially involved with during his final years of active service. The fact that this woman knew both his name and that particular code word eliminated any possibility of coincidence. "Approach the gate slowly," he instructed, keeping his rifle trained on her, hands visible at all times. As she drew closer, Blackwood could see she was younger than he'd initially estimated, mid-20s at most. Her movements betrayed professional training despite the wound she was nursing on her left side. Her tactical winter gear was high quality but unmarked, the kind preferred by operators who needed to maintain deniability. At the gate, she looked directly into the camera, her emerald green eyes showing neither fear nor uncertainty. "My father was Dr. Robert Mitchell," she said. "He said if things went wrong, you were one of the few people I could trust." Another shock of recognition hit Blackwood. Robert Mitchell had been one of the brightest minds at DARPA, a physicist whose work on ballistic prediction models had revolutionized long-range shooting capabilities for special operations forces. More importantly, Mitchell had been one of the few civilians Blackwood had genuinely respected, a man who understood that his theoretical work translated directly to operational effectiveness and saved American lives. After a moment's consideration, Blackwood made his decision. "The gate will open," he said. "Follow the path to the main building. Any deviation will be considered hostile action." As Sarah Mitchell made her way through the compound, Blackwood conducted a final check of the perimeter defenses. The approaching team on the western ridge had halted their advance, likely waiting for the storm to abate or for darkness to provide additional cover. That gave him perhaps 3 hours at most. Inside the main building, the young woman stood in the entrance hall, her posture betraying both exhaustion and the disciplined alertness of someone trained never to fully relax in unfamiliar surroundings. Up close, Blackwood could see that she had her father's features. The same analytical intensity in her gaze, the same set of the jaw that suggested stubborn determination. "Your injury needs attention," Blackwood stated, gesturing toward the medical station in the corner of the room. "It's superficial," she replied, though she didn't refuse when he retrieved a medical kit. "Bullet grazed my ribs during an extraction gone bad." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "Military?" "West Point, class of T2, she confirmed, removing her outer jacket to reveal a tactical compression shirt beneath. The wound on her side was indeed a graze, painful but not life-threatening. "Captain U.S. Army, currently assigned to specialized operations." As Blackwood assisted with cleaning and dressing the wound, he noted other details. The calluses on her trigger finger, consistent with thousands of hours of precision shooting, the controlled breathing techniques taught to elite snipers, the way she constantly maintained awareness of all entry points to the room. This wasn't just a soldier. This was someone trained for the most demanding operational environments. "You mentioned Project Longbow," Blackwood said once the wound was dressed. "That's a name I haven't heard in a long time, and a name you shouldn't know." Sarah accepted a cup of coffee, her hands steady despite her ordeal. "My father didn't just contribute to Project Longbow, Mr. Blackwood. He was its primary architect, and 3 weeks ago, he was murdered because of it." The directness of her statement, delivered without emotional embellishment, reinforced Blackwood's initial assessment. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just Robert's daughter by blood. She had inherited his clinical approach to even the most devastating realities. "Official report says car accident," she continued. "Single vehicle, remote road in Colorado, no witnesses. But my father never drove in icy conditions, not since my mother died that way in 2010. And he certainly wouldn't have been on that particular road at night." Blackwood considered her words carefully. Robert Mitchell had been one of the few genuinely irreplaceable minds in the defense research community. His death should have triggered significant attention, especially given his access to highly classified programs. "Why come to me?" he asked finally. "We worked together briefly, but there are others who are closer to your father." Sarah's eyes met his with unflinching intensity. "Because the night before he died, he sent me a secured message with just 3 things: a file encryption key, your name, and the coordinates of this facility." She reached into her pack and removed a reinforced tablet computer. "He said if anything happened to him, I should bring this to you. Said you'd understand what it meant because you'd seen the impossible shot firsthand." The phrase hit Blackwood like a physical blow. In 2009, during a joint operation in the mountains between Pakistan and Afghanistan, he had witnessed something that defied his understanding of ballistic physics. A shot at a range of over 2,100 meters in high-altitude wind conditions that should have made accuracy impossible. The shooter had been part of a classified Army unit, and the operation itself had been so sensitive that no official report ever acknowledged it happened. "What's on the tablet?" he asked, his voice betraying nothing of his internal recognition. Project Longbow wasn't just about ballistic prediction models, Sarah said. It was about creating a new generation of precision engagement specialists, snipers capable of making shots that conventional wisdom considers impossible. She activated the tablet, navigating through several layers of security before reaching a classified briefing document. 7 candidates were selected based on specific neurological and physiological profiles, all with exceptional mathematical aptitude, visual processing capabilities, and stress response characteristics. We underwent specialized training that combined advanced physics, atmospheric science, and applied mathematics with thousands of hours of practical application. Blackwood studied the document with growing concern. The program parameters described a training regimen that went far beyond conventional special operations preparation, neurological conditioning, specialized cognitive exercises, and ballistic calculation methodologies that essentially rewired the brain's approach to long-range shooting. "You're saying you're one of these longbow operators?" he asked, though the answer was already evident in her demeanor and the clinical precision with which she described the program. Sarah nodded. "Longbow Charlie. My father designed the program, but he insisted on being involved in candidate selection. I think he always intended for me to be part of it, trained me in advanced mathematics and physics from childhood." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He used to take me to the shooting range when I was 12, teaching me ballistic trajectories as though they were just another form of calculus." Blackwood understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a soldier seeking refuge. This was potentially one of the most valuable military assets in American special operations, a human weapon system developed through years of classified research. "If you're who you say you are, why are you running?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Even if your father was targeted, the program would protect its operators." Sarah's expression darkened. "Because 3 other longbow operators have died in the past 6 months. All accidents or training incidents. And after what happened in Syria, I realized I was next on the list." "Syria?" Blackwood prompted, activating his own security protocols on the room's systems. If what she was suggesting was true, the team approaching his compound suddenly made much more sense. "Operation Ghost Mountain," Sarah said, her voice taking on the detached quality that experienced operators used when recounting difficult missions. 3 months ago, I was attached to a SEAL team for what was supposed to be a routine surveillance operation near the Syria-Iraq border. Intelligence had identified a meeting of high-value targets in a fortified compound. She paused, collecting her thoughts. The mission parameters were explicit: observe and report, no engagement. But during observation, we identified 3 individuals whose profiles matched top-tier terrorist leaders. An unprecedented convergence of HVTs in one location. Blackwood nodded in understanding. Such a target opportunity would be nearly impossible to ignore, regardless of initial mission parameters. "Command authorization came through for immediate elimination if feasible," Sarah continued, but the SEAL commander assessed the shot as impossible. The compound was 2,147 yards from our concealed position, with variable winds, significant elevation, and less than ideal visibility. Blackwood performed the mental calculations automatically. At that distance, bullet drop would exceed 40 feet, with wind drift potentially altering point of impact by several feet rather than inches. Add in Coriolis effect, gyroscopic drift, and atmospheric density variations, and you were facing a shot that went beyond skill into the realm of statistical improbability. "The commander said no one could make those shots," Sarah stated, her tone matter-of-fact rather than boastful. I disagreed. I had run the calculations, factoring in all environmental variables and integrating them into a comprehensive trajectory prediction. She looked directly at Blackwood, her expression one of professional assessment rather than pride. 3 shots, 3 targets, 12.3 seconds from first to last. All confirmed kills. The SEAL team extracted safely, and intelligence later confirmed that the elimination of those 3 leaders or collapsed the entire regional command structure of the terrorist network. Blackwood had heard rumors of such an operation, whispers in the closed circles of special operations veterans who still maintained connections to active units. but the distances involved had seemed so far-fetched that he dismissed them as operational exaggeration. That's when things started to feel wrong, Sarah continued. The after-action protocols were unusual. Normally, an operation of that significance would involve comprehensive debriefing, especially given the unprecedented nature of the shots. Instead, I was immediately reassigned to a training role at Fort Bragg, my security clearance quietly downgraded. She reached for the tablet again, navigating to another secure file. 2 weeks later, my father contacted me through our private channel. He said the 3 men I had eliminated weren't terrorist leaders at all. They were CIA assets who had discovered evidence of illegal operations being run by Deputy Director Alexander Crawford. The name triggered immediate recognition for Blackwood. Crawford had been a rising star in the CIA's Special Activities Division during Blackwood's final years of service. Ambitious, politically connected, and rumored to operate with methods that crossed ethical and legal boundaries. According to my father's investigation, Crawford has been running an unauthorized operation called Monarch. On paper, it's a counterterrorism initiative targeting extremist financial networks. In reality, it's a sophisticated weapons transfer program, moving American military technology to extremist groups to fuel regional conflicts. She passed the tablet to Blackwood, displaying detailed financial records, operational timelines, and surveillance photographs. The operative, codenamed Nighthawk, one of the men I killed, had compiled evidence that Crawford was using these manufactured conflicts to manipulate defense contracts and resource allocation. Billions of dollars flowing through shell corporations with connections to private military contractors. Blackwood studied the evidence with the critical eye of someone who had seen his share of intelligence reports, both legitimate and fabricated. The documentation was comprehensive, with multiple verification points and cross-references that would be nearly impossible to falsify. My father called it the Prometheus Files, Sarah explained. Everything needed to expose Crawford's network and the officials protecting him. He was preparing to present it to the Senate Intelligence Committee when he was killed. As Blackwood continued examining the files, a secure communication alert sounded from the main system. The encryption pattern was one he hadn't seen in years, a Cold War-era protocol used by a very select group of operators who had served in classified operations during the Soviet-Afghan conflict. Secure transmission, he noted, moving to the communications terminal. After entering a series of authentication codes, a voice emerged from the speaker, aged but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. Blackwood, it's Garrison. Authentication Sierra 9 Delta Echo. The voice belonged to Colonel Frank Garrison, former commander of Delta Force during the 1980s, and one of the few men Blackwood genuinely respected from his early career. Tell me you have Mitchell's daughter with you. Confirmed, Blackwood replied after a moment's hesitation. How did you know? Because I'm the one who told her father you were the only person she could trust if things went sideways, Garrison answered, his tone grim. The team approaching your position isn't official, not in any way that matters. Crawford has activated a specialized unit under the guise of a national security emergency, using authorization channels that bypass normal oversight. Sarah moved closer to the communication terminal. Colonel Garrison was my father's liaison at the Pentagon, she explained to Blackwood. He's been monitoring Crawford's operation from inside the system. Crawford has compromised Project Longbow, Garrison continued. What began as a legitimate research initiative to develop advanced sniping capabilities has been weaponized for his private agenda. The Syria operation was a test case, using a longbow operator to eliminate potential whistleblowers while maintaining plausible deniability. Blackwood studied the communications pattern carefully, noting something subtly off in Garrison's speech rhythms, a slight hesitation before certain phrases, an uncharacteristic formality in his sentence structure. The colonel was under observation or pressure. He was choosing his words with extreme care. The approaching team? Blackwood asked, careful to maintain normal conversational flow while processing this new layer of complexity. Former Delta, now operating under private contract through Aegis Strategic Solutions, Crawford's preferred cutout for deniable operations. They have authorization to use lethal force under the pretext of apprehending a rogue operator who's compromised classified technology. Sarah's expression remained controlled, but Blackwood could see the tension in her posture. The other longbow operators? Garrison's sigh carried through the speaker. 3 confirmed dead. Longbow Alpha died in a training accident in Colorado. Bravo killed during a supposedly routine operation in Yemen. Fox in a helicopter crash near Fort Benning. The remaining 3 have gone dark, either hiding or already eliminated. Time frame for the assault team? Blackwood asked, already calculating defensive options. They'll wait for conditions to improve, probably after nightfall, Garrison assessed. Crawford wants this contained with minimal attention, a strategic strike under cover of the storm, with a cleanup team to eliminate any evidence. Blackwood nodded, though Garrison couldn't see him. Objectives? Primary target is Sarah and the Prometheus files. Secondary is you. Crawford knows your history and connections. He can't risk you mobilizing your old network once you understand what's happening. The situation clarified itself with cold precision in Blackwood's mind. This wasn't just about protecting one operator or even exposing one corrupt official. This was about preserving fundamental integrity against systemic corruption, the same mission he had dedicated his life to, just on American soil rather than in distant conflict zones. We need to get the Prometheus files to Senator William Carter, Garrison continued. As chairman of the Intelligence Committee, he has the authority and institutional position to initiate formal investigation, even against someone with Crawford's connections. Authenticated contact protocol? Blackwood asked, slipping automatically into operational planning mode. I've established secure channel through mutual associates from his Navy days. Carter is expecting the evidence and has agreed to convene an emergency closed session of the committee, but you'll need to deliver it personally. Electronic transmission is too vulnerable to interception. There was something in Garrison's phrasing, a subtle emphasis on personally, and the omission of a standard security verification protocol they'd always used, that raised Blackwood's suspicions further. Garrison was trying to tell him something without saying it directly. Sarah had moved to the monitoring station, checking the status of the approaching team. They've established a perimeter at the western ridge, she reported, standard containment formation, likely preparing for a night assault. Blackwood made his decision with the clarity that had defined his operational career. Evacuation protocol initiated. We'll use the northern tunnel system to bypass their perimeter, then proceed to the secondary rally point. I'll maintain position within the Pentagon, Garrison confirmed. Provide what cover I can through official channels. But be aware, Crawford has allies throughout the intelligence community. Once they realize you've evaded the initial team, they'll deploy additional resources. Blackwood caught a subtle shift in Garrison's tone on maintained position, a micro-hesitation that suggested coercion. Understood, Colonel. We'll proceed according to Shadowfall protocols. The reference to their failed 1991 operation carried a hidden meaning they'd established years ago, a warning that communication was compromised. Godspeed, Garrison replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what Blackwood was signaling. Secure channel terminated. As the communication ended, Blackwood turned to Sarah, seeing in her the same resolute determination he had witnessed in the finest operators he had served with throughout his career. Despite her youth, she carried herself with the composed confidence of someone who understood precisely what they were facing. Ready? He asked simply. Sarah checked her weapon, a compact Sig Sauer P320 that Blackwood recognized as standard issue for specialized Army units, and nodded. Ready. Together they moved toward the secure armory, where Blackwood selected weapons appropriate for their situation. A modified M4A1 with suppressor and thermal optics for close-range engagements, and a compact Macmillan TAC-338 for long-range work if needed. Sarah chose similar equipment, her selections betraying her familiarity with advanced weapon systems. As they prepared, Blackwood spoke in a low voice. Garrison's compromised, either under direct observation or coercion. His communication pattern showed classic stress indicators. Sarah nodded, not showing surprise. I caught it too. The cadence was wrong, and he omitted our standard verification protocol. He's trying to channel us into a predetermined extraction route, Blackwood continued. We'll acknowledge his direction but implement alternate protocols. The old guard network has contingencies for this scenario. As they prepared, Blackwood activated the compound's automated defense protocols, systems designed to delay pursuit rather than inflict casualties. Smoke generators, false heat signatures, and pre-programmed drone decoys would create confusion and divert resources when the assault team eventually moved in. At the entrance to the northern tunnel system, a Cold War relic that Blackwood had renovated and expanded, he paused, scanning the security feeds one final time. The young recruit had successfully evacuated the other instructors and trainees, leaving Horizon Outpost as a ghost facility awaiting unwelcome visitors. "They're moving into position," Sarah noted, observing the tactical deployment on the monitors. "Standard assault formation." "Wait." She zoomed in on one of the team leaders, studying his movement pattern. "That's Jenkins, former Delta, specialized in breach operations. I trained with him at Fort Bragg before Project Longbow." Blackwood recognized the significance immediately. "They're not just sending any team. They're sending operators who know your capabilities and training protocols." Sarah's expression hardened with professional assessment. "And they know we've spotted them. This isn't a capture mission, Mr. Blackwood. They're coming to eliminate us and secure the files." As if to confirm her analysis, the perimeter sensors detected the assault team beginning their advance, despite the challenging conditions. Blackwood made a final calculation based on decades of operational experience. "They're not waiting for nightfall," he observed. "Crawford must be more desperate than Garrison realized." He shouldered his pack containing essential survival gear and additional ammunition, then gestured toward the tunnel entrance. "They're not just sending any assault team," he said, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had faced worse odds in more hostile environments. "They're sending Delta. I know because I trained half of them back in the day." The heavy steel door of the tunnel sealed behind them with a decisive thud, leaving Horizon Outpost to face its unwelcome visitors alone. Ahead stretched a passage into darkness, leading away from the immediate threat, but toward a confrontation with powers that had corrupted the very institutions Blackwood had spent his life defending. As they moved through the tunnel, illuminated only by tactical lights, Sarah glanced at her companion. "My father said you were the best, that you understood the difference between loyalty to the nation and loyalty to those temporarily controlling its institutions." Blackwood's weathered face revealed nothing of his internal thoughts, but he nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "Your father was a patriot in the true sense, someone who recognized that protecting America sometimes requires standing against those who abuse its power." The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, leading toward uncertain confrontation with forces that had once been their allies. Behind them, the first explosions signaled the assault team's breach of Horizon Outpost defenses, but Blackwood and Sarah were already ghosts, moving through shadows toward a battlefield that would determine not just their survival, but the integrity of institutions that defined American governance itself. The final shot hadn't yet been fired, but Blackwood knew with cold certainty that it would come. And when it did, everything would depend on the precision that had defined his life, not just in marksmanship, but in distinguishing between true enemies and the principles worth defending, regardless of the cost. The assault on Horizon Outpost began with methodical precision. From his vantage point half a mile away, concealed within the dense pines, Blackwood watched through thermal optics as the Delta team executed their breach, a textbook operation that brought an unwelcome sense of pride. They moved with the disciplined efficiency he had once helped instill in America's most elite warriors, now turned against him. The compound's automated defenses activated in sequence, just as he had programmed them. Smoke generators obscured thermal signatures. Decoy heat sources drew precision fire away from critical areas. Pre-recorded radio transmissions created the illusion of a larger defending force. Ancient tactics married to modern technology, the same combination Blackwood had employed against Soviet Spetsnaz in the mountain passes of the Hindu Kush 4 decades earlier. "They're good," Sarah observed. "All ship on our errand." Her voice calm despite the distant explosions now visible through the storm. She had insisted on monitoring the assault before continuing through the tunnel, calculating the team's response patterns. 4-man elements, modified pincer approach. They're treating this like a counter-terrorism operation rather than a recovery mission. Blackwood nodded. Crawford's given them a shoot-to-kill authorization. Easier to classify this as eliminating a national security threat than explaining why they're hunting one of our own. He watched as the team commander, a tall figure whose movement pattern Blackwood recognized immediately, directed the systematic clearing of the main building. Captain Thomas Miller, former Delta operative who had served under Blackwood during a classified operation in Yemen. Now employed by Aegis Strategic Solutions, the private military contractor that served as Crawford's personal enforcement arm. They're wasting time with standard clearing procedures, Blackwood noted with grim satisfaction. By the time they realize we're not there, the storm will have covered our tracks. Sarah studied the tactical display on her specialized tablet, her expression revealing nothing of the emotion she must feel watching elite American operators hunting her. The northern tunnel exit is 2 miles out. Assuming they find the tunnel entrance within 30 minutes, they'll still be at least an hour behind us. The distant crack of a high-caliber rifle echoed through the valley as one of the Delta snipers eliminated a mechanical decoy. The precision of the shot, even through the storm, spoke to the skill level they were facing. "We should move," Blackwood said, securing the observation equipment. Staying in one position too long against this level of opposition is tactical suicide. As they continued through the tunnel, a relic from the early 1960s when the Cold War had prompted the construction of numerous contingency facilities throughout the American West, Blackwood's mind calculated escape routes and survival probabilities with cold efficiency. The tunnel itself had been expanded and reinforced during his ownership of the property, designed specifically as an evacuation route that wouldn't appear on any government documentation. The original tunnel was dug in 1962, he explained, as they moved through the reinforced passage. Part of Project Safeguard, a distributed network of hardened facilities established during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Most were abandoned by the mid-70s, forgotten when the immediate threat subsided. Sarah moved alongside him with the balanced stride of someone trained for extended operations under physical duress. "My father mentioned these facilities, said they represented the perfect blend of paranoia and pragmatism that defined the Cold War." Blackwood allowed himself a small smile. "Your father understood the value of preparing for worst-case scenarios, a trait that apparently runs in the family." The tunnel gradient increased, sloping upward toward the exit point located in a natural rock formation 2 miles north of the main compound. As they approached the terminus, Blackwood activated a specialized monitoring system, passive sensors that detected heat signatures and movement patterns without emitting signals that could be traced. "Clear," he confirmed after studying the data. But the storms intensified. Visibility will be less than 50 yards, temperatures well below zero with wind chill. Sarah checked her cold weather gear, high-end military-grade equipment designed for Arctic operations. "Navigation plan?" "Old school," Blackwood replied, producing a specialized compass from his pack. "Magnetic navigation with terrain association. No GPS, too easily tracked. 3 miles northeast to the emergency cache, then we reassess based on pursuit indicators." He studied her face for any sign of doubt or hesitation, finding none. Despite her youth, Sarah Mitchell carried herself with the composed confidence of a veteran operator, the product of both genetic inheritance and specialized training that had prepared her for precisely this type of high-stress scenario. The exit hatch opened to a world transformed by winter's fury. Wind howled across the mountainside with predatory intensity, driving snow horizontally through the darkness. Even with advanced cold weather gear, the temperature impact was immediate and severe, the kind of cold that didn't just chill, but actively hunted for any exposure. Blackwood secured the exit behind them, ensuring it would appear as a natural rock formation to anyone without specific knowledge of its existence. Then, with practiced efficiency, he established their navigation baseline and began moving northeast through the pine forest, maintaining a pace that balanced speed against energy conservation. The Montana wilderness in winter bore little resemblance to the tourist-friendly landscapes of summer. What had been accessible terrain transformed into a treacherous obstacle course of snow-laden deadfalls, hidden gullies, and ice-slicked rock faces. Progress required constant attention and significant physical exertion, made more challenging by the need to minimize trackable signs of passage. After an hour of methodical movement, Blackwood called a brief halt in the shelter of a rock outcropping that provided minimal protection from the relentless wind. Despite the extreme conditions, he maintained the situational awareness that had kept him alive through decades of operations in hostile environments, constantly scanning their back trail, identifying potential ambush positions, and updating their tactical situation. Storms providing good concealment, he assessed, removing a vacuum-sealed package of high-calorie rations from his pack. But it's moving east faster than forecast. We may lose our weather cover within 3 hours. Sarah accepted the offered ration, consuming it with the mechanical efficiency of someone who viewed food as tactical necessity rather than pleasure. The Delta team will have found the tunnel by now. They'll deploy along projected exit vectors once they realize the main exit is concealed. Blackwood nodded in agreement. Standard containment protocol would put at least 2 four-man elements on our most likely routes. They'll be hampered by the same conditions, but they have numbers and air support once the weather breaks. He studied her as she performed equipment checks with practiced precision, verifying weapon condition, communication security, and navigation tools. The methodical attention to detail reminded him of her father, who had approached both scientific research and field operations with the same uncompromising thoroughness. You know, your father wasn't always the scientist, Blackwood said, as they prepared to move again. Before he joined DARPA, he was part of a specialized intelligence unit during the late stages of the Cold War, technical surveillance and assessment in Soviet-controlled territories. Sarah's expression revealed mild surprise. He never mentioned field operations, always described himself as a lab rat who accidentally did something useful. Typical Robert, Blackwood replied, a rare hint of warmth in his voice. He never took credit for his contributions. But Operation Stillwater in '86, when we extracted the Soviet physicist from East Berlin, wouldn't have succeeded without his technical expertise. He disabled the automated security systems that would have detected our approach. As they resumed their journey through the storm-ravaged landscape, Blackwood shared selected memories of operations with Robert Mitchell, carefully chosen stories that provided insight without compromising still classified details. The shared history formed a connection bridge, helping establish the trust necessary for their survival. He taught me Norwegian winter survival techniques, Blackwood explained as he demonstrated a specialized snow-melting method that conserved both energy and fuel. During joint exercises with their Jägertruppen in the Arctic Circle, said proper preparation matters more than equipment when facing environmental extremes. Sarah absorbed the instruction with focused attention. He passed some of that knowledge to me, took me winter camping in the Rockies every year, taught me how to read snow conditions, find shelter, navigate by natural indicators. He was preparing you, Blackwood observed, long before Project Longbow was formalized. I think he always knew where my path would lead, she acknowledged, her voice carrying a complexity of emotion beneath the professional exterior. From the mathematics lessons disguised as games to the vacation trips that somehow always included marksmanship training. They continued through the wilderness, Blackwood occasionally pointing out subtle terrain features that would be invisible to less experienced eyes. Natural defilades that offered concealment, game trails that provided easier passage, rock formations that could serve as emergency shelter. How did you get involved in Project Longbow? He asked as they navigated a particularly challenging stretch of terrain. Sarah's pace remained steady, her breathing controlled despite the physical demands. Officially, I was selected based on neurological and aptitude profiles during advanced training at West Point. In reality, my father had identified me as a potential candidate years earlier. She paused, ducking under a snow-laden pine branch. The project needed individuals with specific cognitive traits, exceptional mathematical processing, superior visual spatial integration, and neurological structures conducive to maintaining absolute physical stillness under stress. Abilities that can be enhanced but are primarily genetic in origin. Blackwood understood the implications immediately. Your father designed a program around capabilities he knew you possessed. He created a training methodology that could identify and enhance natural predispositions, she corrected. I wasn't the only candidate, just the one whose abilities he understood most intimately. The conversation fell into natural silence as they approached a ridgeline that required their full attention to navigate safely. Beyond it lay a small valley where Blackwood had established one of several emergency caches, supplies and equipment positioned strategically throughout the region for contingency operations. The cache was concealed within what appeared to be an abandoned mining shed, a common sight in the Montana wilderness, ignored by hikers and forestry officials alike. Inside, beneath a false floor, Blackwood had maintained a comprehensive survival depot: weapons, ammunition, communications equipment, medical supplies, and enough provisions for extended operations. "Clear the interior," Blackwood instructed as they approached the weathered structure. "I'll establish perimeter security." While Sarah checked the shed for signs of disturbance or surveillance, Blackwood deployed passive security measures around the approach vectors, simple but effective early warning systems that would alert them to anyone approaching within 100 yards. Inside the shed, Sarah had already accessed the hidden compartment and was inventorying the supplies with professional efficiency. "Communications equipment is still sealed," she reported. "Medical supplies intact. Weapons cache includes 2 additional rifles and approximately 400 rounds of match-grade ammunition." Blackwood secured the entrance, using the brief respite from the storm to check for any signs of pursuit. The howling wind had diminished slightly, reducing the whiteout conditions but bringing with it a dangerous drop in temperature as the Arctic air mass strengthened its grip on the region. "We have perhaps 2 hours before air reconnaissance becomes viable," he assessed, brushing accumulated snow from his outer gear. "We need to establish contact with any surviving longbow operators and verify garrison's status." Sarah nodded, already configuring the specialized communication equipment from the cache. Project Longbow included emergency protocols, specific transmission parameters that would be recognized only by program graduates. "It's how I initially planned to contact the others before my father directed me to you instead." As she worked, Blackwood retrieved a weatherproof case containing intelligence materials he had maintained from his final years of service: contact protocols, safe house locations, and identification signals for the unofficial network of former operators who existed outside official channels. Men and women who, like him, had recognized the occasional necessity of operating beyond institutional constraints when those institutions became compromised. "The old guard network," Sarah observed, recognizing the encrypted contact list Blackwood was reviewing. "My father mentioned it, a shadow system of former operators who maintain connections outside official channels." "A necessary precaution," Blackwood confirmed. "When you've seen how easily systems can be corrupted from within, you learn to create contingencies that exist beyond institutional control." Sarah completed the communication setup, activating a specialized transmission system that utilized frequency hopping protocols developed during the Cold War but updated with modern encryption. "Initiating longbow emergency sequence. Authentication pattern will repeat on 6-minute intervals." As the system began its automated transmission cycle, Sarah retrieved the secured tablet containing the Prometheus files, navigating to a personnel directory that Blackwood hadn't yet reviewed. "These are the other longbow operators," she explained, displaying profiles of 6 individuals with specialized training histories and performance metrics. As Colonel Garrison confirmed, 3 are confirmed dead. The status of the others is unknown. Blackwood studied the files with professional interest, noting the exceptional qualifications of each selected operator. Marcus Reynolds, Longbow Alpha, former Army Ranger, specialized in high-altitude operations. Last known position in Colorado, operating under commercial cover as a wilderness guide. Reynolds was the first successful longbow graduate, Sarah confirmed, completed the program 2 years before me, deployed primarily in mountainous regions where his specialized calculations for altitude variables proved particularly effective. Jennifer Hayes, Longbow Delta, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, specialized in urban environment operations. Last reported in northern Idaho, but communications ceased 3 weeks ago. Hayes was the program's urban warfare specialist, Sarah added. Developed new methodologies for calculating ballistic performance through multiple structural materials. The bullets she designed can maintain predictable trajectories after passing through up to 3 different density barriers. Michael Chen, Longbow Echo, Air Force Special Operations, atmospheric science background. Currently listed as on detached service to the CIA's Special Activities Division. At this name, Blackwood paused, his expression shifting subtly. Chen, any relation to Major David Chen? Sarah checked the file. Father listed as Major David Chen, Air Force Special Operations, killed in action, 1991. Blackwood's weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes carried a sudden weight of recognition. David Chen was my spotter during Operation Shadowfall in northern Iraq. one of the three team members who died when our extraction was compromised. The revelation hung between them, another thread connecting their paths across decades of classified operations and personal loss. According to my father's notes, Sarah continued after a respectful moment, Michael Chen was specifically recruited for Project Longbow. His psychological profile indicated both exceptional aptitude and strong motivation stemming from his father's death. Using personal tragedy as an operational motivator, Blackwood observed, his tone carrying the weight of someone who recognized the pattern from personal experience. Effective, but ethically questionable. The communication system suddenly activated, indicating an incoming transmission on one of the emergency frequencies. Both immediately shifted focus, Blackwood adjusting the receiver while Sarah prepared to authenticate any response. Longbow Alpha responding to emergency protocol. A male voice emerged through carefully controlled static. Authentication sequence, Sierra Tango 98 Delta, requesting secondary verification. Sarah leaned toward the microphone. Secondary authentication. First shot at Kalima Ridge, 376 meters, 27-degree crosswind compensation. A brief pause followed before the voice responded. Confirmed, Longbow Charlie. Your transmission security is compromised. Switch to contingency channel Delta. Authentication code, Whiskey Echo 7. Blackwood immediately recognized the warning. Not that their current transmission had been intercepted, but that the responder had reason to believe their communication protocols were being monitored. He quickly adjusted to the specified backup frequency while Sarah entered the new authentication sequence. Secure channel established. Reynolds' voice returned, clearer now. Location compromised. Multiple pursuit teams. Longbow Delta is with me. We've established temporary secure position in the Bitterroot range, transmitting coordinates via burst encryption. The communications system displayed a set of coordinates approximately 30 miles southeast of their current position, a remote area of the Bitterroot Mountains known for its challenging terrain and limited access points. Acknowledged, Sarah responded. Estimated arrival 18 hours with current environmental conditions. Status of Longbow Echo? Unknown, Reynolds replied, his voice carrying the controlled tension of an operator under pressure. Last contact indicated CIA internal investigation. He went dark 3 weeks ago after transmitting partial evidence regarding Operation Monarch. His status is presumed compromised. Blackwood exchanged a significant look with Sarah. If Chen had been operating within the CIA while gathering evidence against Crawford, his position would have been extraordinarily vulnerable. We have the Prometheus files, Sarah transmitted, complete documentation of Operation Monarch and related activities. Critical update, Reynolds responded immediately. Colonel Garrison's communication pattern has shown irregularities for the past 48 hours. Analysis suggests complex situation, not straightforward compromise. The communication protocols he's using contain embedded secondary messages consistent with counterintelligence operations. The planned contact with Senator Carter should be approached with extreme caution, but not abandoned. This assessment matched Blackwood's own suspicions. Garrison was playing a dangerous game, appearing to cooperate with Crawford while potentially working against him. Such double-agent scenarios were among the most perilous in intelligence operations, with the highest failure rates. Transmitting alternative approach vector for our position, Reynolds continued. Use cold weather protocol November. We have established secure communication with verified intelligence committee staff. Alternate pathway to oversight exists. As the transmission ended with updated tactical information, Blackwood immediately began analyzing the new intelligence against his decades of operational experience. He reviewed the recent communications from Garrison, searching for the subtle indicators that might confirm Reynolds' assessment. The last transmission from Garrison used non-standard syntax patterns, he noted, identifying discrepancies that would be invisible to anyone without specific knowledge of the colonel's communication habits. His authentication was technically correct, but the follow-up sequence contained embedded secondary markers we established during joint operations in the 90s. Sarah studied the transmission logs, her analytical mind processing the patterns. You think he's running a deep cover operation? Possible. Best case, he's in a controlled opposition position, appearing to work with Crawford while gathering evidence or establishing countermeasures. Worst case, he's being coerced and trying to provide warning through encoded communications. The tactical situation had become significantly more complex. Their primary extraction plan, centered around Garrison's connection to Senator Carter, needed to be approached with extreme caution. The nearest verified allies were 30 miles away through hostile terrain and extreme weather conditions, and the Delta team pursuing them would soon have air support once the storm system moved east. We need to move, Blackwood decided, already preparing the essential equipment from the cache. The storm's eastern progression will create a brief window of satellite reconnaissance vulnerability in approximately 3 hours. We need to be in heavy forest cover by then. Sarah efficiently packed the communication equipment and secured the Prometheus files. Fastest route to the Bitterroot coordinates? Blackwood consulted his mental map of the region, calculating terrain challenges against pursuit probabilities. Direct approach is too exposed. We'll use the Carson Valley route, longer but provides better concealment and multiple diversion options if we encounter pursuit teams. As they prepared to depart, the passive perimeter sensors activated, a subtle vibration pattern indicating movement approximately 200 yards northwest of their position. Blackwood immediately dimmed the interior lighting and moved to a concealed observation port, using specialized optics to scan the indicated sector. Two-man element, he reported quietly, identifying the heat signatures moving through the forest with tactical precision. Standard reconnaissance pattern, they've picked up our general direction, but not our specific location. Sarah verified her weapon was ready, her movements calm and controlled despite the immediate threat. Options? They're ranging ahead of the main pursuit team, Blackwood assessed. Taking them out would alert the others to our approximate position. Better to execute a concealed withdrawal while they continue their search pattern. With practiced efficiency, they secured the cache, removing all evidence of their presence and preparing for immediate departure through a concealed exit at the rear of the structure. The exit led to a narrow ravine that provided natural concealment while leading away from their pursuer's current search vector. Move at 15-second intervals, Blackwood instructed. Use the pine line for initial concealment, then cross the ravine at the narrow point. I'll follow and secure our trail. Sarah nodded, understanding the tactical necessity without further explanation. As she prepared to move, Blackwood placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of professional confidence rather than personal reassurance. They're good, he acknowledged, but we're better. The journey toward the Bitterroot coordinates became a masterclass in evasion techniques. Blackwood led them through terrain features that maximize concealment while minimizing trackable signs of passage, moving through streams to eliminate scent trails, utilizing rock formations that wouldn't hold footprints, and employing specialized movement techniques that distributed weight to prevent detectable snow compression. The temperature continued to drop as night approached, transforming their environment from merely hostile to potentially lethal. Even with advanced cold weather gear, the combination of physical exertion, limited nutrition, and extreme cold created dangerous conditions that required constant management. Norwegian Special Forces technique, Blackwood explained as he demonstrated a specialized breathing pattern designed to minimize heat loss while maintaining optimal oxygen levels. Learned it during Arctic warfare training in '83. The Russians were developing northern approach capabilities that we needed to counter. Sarah adopted the technique immediately, her body responding with the adaptability of someone extensively trained in environmental stress management. My father mentioned your time with the Norwegian Jägertroppen, said they had the most advanced cold weather combat techniques in NATO. As the daylight faded, they located a natural shelter formation, a rock overhang partially concealed by dense pines that offered protection from both the elements and potential aerial observation. Blackwood made the tactical decision to establish a temporary rest position, recognizing that continued movement in darkness under these conditions would deplete their resources without sufficient compensating advantage. 4-hour rotation, he determined, establishing a security perimeter with passive detection devices from his pack. I'll take first watch. Use the time to review the Prometheus files for any intelligence we might have missed. While Sarah created a minimal heat source using specialized chemical warmers that produced no detectable signature, Blackwood established an observation position that provided coverage of all likely approach vectors. The storm had begun to slacken slightly, reducing their concealment advantage, but also improving visibility for defensive purposes. 2 hours into his watch, with Sarah reviewing the intelligence files while maintaining operational readiness, Blackwood detected movement at the extreme range of his observation sector. A single figure moving with tactical precision through the forest approximately 400 yards east of their position. Contact, single operator, eastern approach, he reported quietly, not shifting his position. Movement pattern indicates advanced training, not standard Delta tactics. Sarah immediately secured the intelligence materials and moved to a secondary observation position, using her own specialized optics to assess the potential threat. Unusual approach vector, not consistent with standard sweep patterns. Blackwood continued tracking the figure, noting the distinctive movement technique that spoke of specialized training beyond conventional special operations methodology. They sent a hunter, he assessed, someone with advanced tracking capabilities operating independent of the main pursuit teams. The approaching figure paused at a position that provided limited observation of the surrounding terrain, performing what Blackwood recognized as a specialized environmental assessment, checking snow patterns, branch positions, and other subtle indicators that might reveal recent human passage. Hold position, Blackwood instructed. If they've detected us, they'll establish a pattern confirmation before signaling the main element. They watched in professional silence as the tracker continued their methodical approach, moving with a patience and precision that Blackwood recognized from his own training of elite snipers. The figure would advance a short distance, then remain absolutely motionless for extended periods, using both technology and natural observation to detect any anomalies in the environment. When the tracker was approximately 200 yards from their position, they made a subtle but telling adjustment to their approach vector, a minor course correction that aligned directly with the concealed shelter where Blackwood and Sarah had established their position. "They've made us," Blackwood concluded, his voice carrying no emotion despite the tactical implications. "Question is whether they're operating alone or have already signaled the main pursuit element." Sarah had already begun calculating firing solutions for various distances, her mind processing the complex variables of temperature, wind, and terrain that would affect a potential engagement. Clean shot at current position. No witnesses, no radio transmission detected. Blackwood considered the options with the cold calculation that had defined his operational career. Eliminating the tracker would remove the immediate threat, but would leave a body that would eventually be discovered. Not engaging meant potentially exposing their position to the main pursuit force. The decision was made for them when the tracker suddenly dropped into a concealed position behind a fallen tree, their movement patterns shifting from reconnaissance to offensive positioning. "They're setting up," Blackwood observed, "preparing to engage or call for support." Sarah had already moved to an optimal firing position, her rifle braced against a natural support formed by the rock outcropping. Wind is 12 knots from the northwest. Temperature compensation for 22 Fahrenheit. Atmospheric density requires 1.3 MOE adjustment from standard. As she prepared for the shot, Blackwood detected a subtle movement at the extreme edge of his observational field, a second figure approaching from the western vector, using the first tracker as either bait or a distraction. "Second contact, western approach, using parallax concealment," he warned, already adjusting his own position to cover this new threat. The tactical situation had deteriorated rapidly. Two specialized operators had successfully maneuvered to within engagement range of their position, using advanced techniques that suggested exceptional training. The probability of additional team members in supporting positions was high. "I'll take the western target," Blackwood decided. "On my mark, engage simultaneously. Non-lethal if possible. Center mass through winter gear should incapacitate without killing." Sarah made a final adjustment to her scope, her breathing slowing to the controlled rhythm of an elite precision shooter. Blackwood positioned his own rifle, calculating the complex ballistics necessary for accuracy in the extreme conditions. 3, 2, 1, mark. Two shots rang out in perfect synchronization, the suppressed rifles producing minimal sound despite their substantial power. Through his scope, Blackwood watched his target drop immediately, the round end impacting precisely where intended, through the shoulder region, neutralizing without killing. "Target down," Sarah confirmed, her voice maintaining professional detachment. Clean hit, non-lethal. As Blackwood continued scanning for additional threats, Sarah quickly gathered their essential equipment, preparing for immediate relocation. The engagement, while successful, had compromised their position and would almost certainly draw additional pursuit forces. "We need to move immediately," Blackwood instructed, already planning their egress route. "They'll have emergency transmitters. We have perhaps 10 minutes before their failure to report triggers a response." They departed the shelter using a pre-planned escape route, moving with the urgency of operators who understood the tactical timeline they faced. As they navigated through the darkening forest, Blackwood noted that Sarah maintained perfect tactical spacing and movement discipline despite the high-stress situation, further evidence of her exceptional training and natural aptitude. Their evasion route took them through increasingly challenging terrain, narrow ravines, dense pine thickets, and rock formations that required technical climbing skills. Blackwood selected the path deliberately, utilizing terrain features that would slow or channel any pursuing forces while playing to their own strengths in navigation and environmental adaptation. After 90 minutes of continuous movement, they reached a position that offered both tactical advantage and temporary security, a natural cave formation concealed behind a frozen waterfall. The approach required traversing a narrow ice ledge that would funnel any pursuers into a vulnerable position while providing clear observation of all approach vectors. Defensive position established, Blackwood confirmed after completing a thorough security assessment. Limited thermal signature due to the water ice barrier. Anyone approaching will be visible for at least 300 yards in all directions. Sarah had already established a minimal survival configuration, enough to prevent hypothermia without creating detectable heat signatures. As she secured their equipment, Blackwood noticed she was moving with subtle compensation for what appeared to be an injury. "You're wounded," he observed, his experienced eye detecting the minute adjustments in her movement pattern. "Ricocheted fragment during the engagement," she acknowledged, revealing a torn section of her tactical gear where a bullet fragment had grazed her arm. "Surface laceration only, already applied field dressing." Blackwood retrieved the medical kit from his pack, insisting on properly cleaning and dressing the wound despite her assurances. As he worked, he noticed an unusual scar pattern on her upper arm, surgical in nature but with a distinctive configuration he recognized from classified medical procedures. "Neural enhancement implant," he identified, his tone neutral but questioning. Sarah met his gaze directly. "Part of the Longbow Advanced Integration System, microsensors that enhance proprioceptive feedback during precision shooting. Allows for real-time neuromuscular adjustments based on environmental variables." "Your father's design," Blackwood surmised, completing the proper dressing of her wound. "The culmination of his work on human performance optimization," she confirmed. "Controversial even within the classified program. The integration of technology and human capability at a neurological level." As Blackwood secured the medical supplies, Sarah retrieved a specialized communication device from her pack, more advanced than the standard emergency equipment they had been using. "We need to update Reynolds on our situation and adjust the rendezvous coordinates. The engagement likely compromised our approach vector." While she established the secure communication channel, Blackwood performed a thorough weapons check and ammunition inventory. The engagement had forced them to expend resources they had hoped to conserve, and the intensity of the pursuit suggested they would face additional confrontations before reaching safety. "Reynolds confirms our adjusted approach," Sarah reported after completing the encrypted transmission. "He and Hayes have relocated to a secondary position 10 miles southeast of the original coordinates. They've established what they believe is a secure route to Senator Carter through an intermediary with historical connections to the Intelligence Oversight Committee." Blackwood considered this information with cautious optimism. "Did they have any update on Garrison's status?" "Complex situation," Sarah replied, her expression reflecting the nuanced intelligence. "Reynolds has intercepted fragmentary communications suggesting Garrison may be operating in a counterintelligence capacity, possibly FBI or Internal Defense Intelligence Agency. The patterns match known deep cover protocols." This assessment aligned with Blackwood's growing suspicions. Garrison had always maintained connections across multiple intelligence services, and his career had included several periods of administrative assignment that might have been cover for counterintelligence operations. If Garrison is running a sanctioned operation against Crawford, It would explain the communication patterns, Blackwood noted. He'd need to appear compromised while maintaining deniable channels to legitimate oversight. The tactical situation was evolving into something more complex than a simple corruption case. If counterintelligence elements were already investigating Crawford, it suggested the corruption had been identified by institutional safeguards, but that Crawford's network was powerful enough to require extraordinary measures to penetrate. We'll move again in 2 hours, Blackwood decided, calculating rest requirements against tactical timelines. The storm front will reach the Bitterroot Range by dawn, providing additional concealment for our approach. Reynolds and Hayes represent our best chance of establishing a secure channel to legitimate oversight. Sarah nodded agreement, already making the necessary preparations for their next movement phase. As she worked, Blackwood noticed her pause briefly, her hand moving to a concealed inner pocket of her tactical vest. "My father gave me something else," she said, removing a small metallic object that Blackwood immediately recognized as a specialized data storage device of military design. Said if everything else failed, this contained a direct communication channel to someone who could bypass the entire institutional structure. He called it the last resort. Blackwood examined the device with professional interest. Military-grade quantum encryption, designed for absolute security in compromised environments. "He never told me who was on the other end," Sarah explained. "Just said it was someone he and you had both served with. Someone who understood the difference between institutional loyalty and constitutional obligation." As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Blackwood found himself reassessing their situation. The presence of the specialized communication device suggested Robert Mitchell had anticipated potential institutional failure and established contingencies that went beyond conventional channels. It represented both hope and a concerning recognition of how deeply the corruption might extend. The frozen waterfall outside their shelter caught the moonlight that now penetrated the breaking storm clouds, creating an ethereal blue illumination that belied the deadly serious nature of their situation. In that momentary quiet, with tactical preparations complete and the immediate threat temporarily contained, Blackwood found himself studying Sarah Mitchell with new understanding. She represented more than just an exceptional operator or the daughter of a former colleague. She embodied the intersection of their generations. The Cold War methodologies he had pioneered merged with the technological integration she represented. The old ways and the new, combined in service to principles that transcended both. "Get some rest," he advised, taking position at the observation point. "The next phase will require everything we've got." As Sarah settled into the disciplined rest pattern of an experienced operator, maintaining partial awareness while allowing necessary recovery, Blackwood kept watch over the moonlit landscape. The brief clearing in the weather revealed the vast Montana wilderness stretching to the horizon, a territory he had chosen for its isolation and rugged beauty, now transformed into a battlefield where American operators hunted other Americans in service to corrupted authority. The irony wasn't lost on him. After decades fighting America's enemies abroad, he now found himself protecting American principles against threats from within, the ultimate test of the oath he had taken so many years ago to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The night deepened around them, the temperature dropping to levels that would kill the unprepared within hours. Blackwood maintained his vigilance, his mind calculating approach vectors, defensive options, and survival probabilities with the cold precision that had kept him alive through decades of operations in the world's most hostile environments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and likely confrontations. But for this moment, in the frozen silence of the Montana night, they had achieved the operator's most fundamental victory. They had survived to continue the mission. And in their world, sometimes that was enough. The question that remained hanging unspoken in the frigid air between them was whether the America they had both sworn to protect could survive the corruption that had taken root within its most powerful institutions. The answer would come, Blackwood knew, not through policy or politics, but through the actions of individuals willing to stand for founding principles regardless of the personal cost. In the end, that had always been America's last line of defense, not weapons or walls, but people prepared to make the difficult choices when institutions failed. People willing to take the impossible shot when everything that mattered hung in the balance. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Bitterroot Mountains, the storm having moved eastward overnight, leaving behind a crystalline landscape of impossible beauty and deadly challenge. Blackwood and Sarah reached the rendezvous coordinates shortly after first light, navigating the final approach with heightened caution. Experience had taught Blackwood that rendezvous points represented both sanctuary and vulnerability. The moment when scattered assets converged was often when pursuers struck most effectively. The location Marcus Reynolds had selected demonstrated the tactical thinking of an experienced operator. An abandoned fire lookout tower positioned on a ridge that offered commanding views of all approach vectors while providing multiple escape routes. The structure itself was officially decommissioned in the 1980s, but Reynolds had clearly prepared it as a contingency position, evidenced by the subtle reinforcements and concealed security measures Blackwood noted during their approach. Movement at the western corner, Sarah observed, her eyes tracking a nearly imperceptible shift in position that most would have missed entirely. Defensive posture, controlled observation. Blackwood nodded, having detected the same. Reynolds, the disciplined stillness gives him away. Let's make our approach visible and controlled. They proceeded along the designated path, maintaining deliberate visibility while demonstrating the measured movement patterns that identified them as friendly forces to trained observers. As they neared the structure, a woman emerged from a concealed position 50 yards east of the tower, Jennifer Hayes, Longbow Delta. Even at a distance, her posture and situational awareness marked her as an exceptional operator, maintaining perfect coverage of her sector while allowing Reynolds to focus on the western approach. "Clear approach," Hayes called, her voice carrying just enough to reach them without creating unnecessary sound signature. Final authentication required. Sarah provided the required challenge and response sequence, a specialized code phrase system developed specifically for Project Longbow that combined mathematical references with operational history markers. The authentication complete, they were escorted to the tower's reinforced entrance, where Marcus Reynolds waited. At 32, Reynolds carried himself with the quiet confidence of an elite operator who had nothing to prove. His physical presence, 6'2" with the lean, efficient musculature of someone built for endurance rather than show, was complemented by eyes that missed nothing and revealed less. As Longbow Alpha, he had been the program's first successful graduate, the proof of concept that had secured continued funding and expansion. Blackwood, he acknowledged with professional respect, extending his hand. "Your reputation precedes you. Your work in the Korengal changed how we approach mountain warfare sniping." "Reynolds," Blackwood returned the greeting, taking the measure of the man who represented the next generation of specialized operators. "Your work at Falcon Ridge made some of us old-timers rethink what's possible." Jennifer Hayes stepped forward, completing the introductions. At 29, she carried herself with the precise economy of movement that marked elite female operators. No wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes reflected the focused intensity of someone who had successfully navigated a domain historically dominated by men. "Captain Hayes," she introduced herself with a brisk handshake. "Marine Corps Scout Sniper Program, your infiltration techniques in Fallujah are still taught at Quantico." The brief exchange established mutual professional respect, the currency that mattered most in their world. Inside the lookout tower, Reynolds had established a comprehensive tactical operations center. Communications equipment, surveillance systems, weapons cache, and a specialized planning station centered around a topographic model of the Washington, D.C. region. "We've secured a direct channel to Senator Carter," Reynolds explained, leading them to the communications center where specialized encryption equipment hummed quietly. Hayes made contact through a former Marine Corps officer who served with Carter in Vietnam, Colonel James Westbrook, now working as Carter's unofficial security advisor. Hayes, who had maintained security position at the entrance, added, "Westbrook established the connection using protocols outside standard government channels. Carter is expecting delivery of the Prometheus files within the next 48 hours." Blackwood studied the operational map, his experienced eye immediately identifying the challenges they faced. Reaching Carter in Washington presents significant difficulties. Crawford will have surveillance on all official and unofficial locations associated with the senator, which is why we're not using any of the known approaches, Reynolds confirmed, indicating a specific area on the tactical map. Carter maintains a private residence in Northern Virginia unknown to his official security detail. Cold War legacy property passed down through his family, maintained off official records specifically for contingency purposes. Sarah had removed the secured tablet containing the Prometheus files, connecting it to a specialized data system that Reynolds had prepared. We need to prepare a comprehensive briefing package for the senator. The Prometheus files contain extensive technical documentation and financial intelligence that requires context for proper interpretation. As Sarah and Reynolds began preparing the briefing materials, Hayes approached Blackwood with information displayed on a specialized communications device. We've detected unusual encrypted traffic associated with Michael Chen's last known communication protocols, she reported. Analysis suggests he's being held at an Aegis Black Site facility outside Alexandria. Blackwood studied the intelligence with professional interest. Confirmation of location? Partial, Hayes replied. The transmission patterns indicate a secured facility with military-grade countermeasures. Based on signal characteristics and known Aegis operational procedures, we've narrowed the location to 3 potential sites. This one, she indicated a location on the map, shows unusual power consumption and security deployment consistent with high-value detention protocols. The revelation created a critical decision point. Michael Chen represented both a valuable asset, another longbow operator with potential additional intelligence, and a significant vulnerability if he had been compromised through coercion or other means. We need to split resources, Blackwood determined after careful consideration. Primary objective remains delivering the Prometheus files to Senator Carter. Secondary objective is assessing Chen's status and extracting him if viable. Reynolds nodded agreement. Hayes and I can secure delivery of the files through the established channel. You and Sarah have the tactical experience necessary for a potential extraction operation. The division of responsibilities made operational sense. Reynolds and Hayes had established the secure channel to Carter and were intimately familiar with the approach protocols. Blackwood and Sarah possessed the specialized infiltration skills necessary for a high-risk extraction from a secure facility. There's another factor to consider, Sarah added, her expression reflecting professional concern rather than personal emotion. If Chen is being held and interrogated, they may be attempting to extract information about the other longbow operators in the full scope of the Prometheus files. Time sensitivity established, Blackwood acknowledged. How soon can we be operational in the D.C. area? Reynolds moved to a secure storage locker, retrieving what appeared to be standard business attire but which Blackwood immediately recognized as specialized tactical clothing designed for urban operations. Garments that concealed ballistic protection and equipment carriage capabilities within seemingly normal civilian appearance. Transportation secured through Old Guard network contacts, Reynolds explained. Private charter to a regional airfield outside D.C., ground transportation arranged through vetted assets. You can be operational within 8 hours. Blackwood began mentally calculating infiltration approaches for the suspected detention facility, drawing on decades of experience with similar operations. We'll need comprehensive intelligence on the facility layout, security protocols, and personnel rotations. Already compiling, and Hayes confirmed, activating a specialized data terminal that displayed architectural schematics and security system analyses. The facility operates under commercial cover as a private research center, but the security footprint is military-grade. Perimeter sensors, armed response teams, electronic countermeasures. As they continued operational planning, Sarah worked with Reynolds to prepare the essential components of the Prometheus files for delivery to Senator Carter. The comprehensive documentation had been organized into categorized modules: financial intelligence tracking Crawford's illicit operations, technical specifications of diverted weapon systems, personnel files of compromised officials, and the complete operational history of Project Longbow. Carter needs to understand the full scope of the threat, Sarah explained, highlighting specific sections of the intelligence package. Operation Monarch is concerning enough, but if Crawford has compromised longbow technology and methodology, the implications extend far beyond illegal weapons transfers. Reynolds nodded agreement, his expression reflecting the gravity of their situation. Project Longbow represents a fundamental advancement in precision engagement capabilities. In the wrong hands, it creates the potential for unattributable elimination of targets at ranges previously considered impossible. The planning continued with methodical precision, each team member contributing their specialized expertise to the developing operation. Hayes focused on communication security and intelligence analysis, Reynolds on logistical coordination and approach vectors, Sarah on organizing the critical evidence, and Blackwood on tactical planning for the potential extraction operation. 6 hours later, they departed the mountain facility via separate routes, Reynolds and Hayes heading directly to the secure meeting location in Northern Virginia, while Blackwood and Sarah proceeded toward the suspected detention facility where Michael Chen was being held. The transportation arrangements demonstrated the extensive reach of the Old Guard network, former operators who had transitioned to civilian roles while maintaining connections and capabilities outside official channels. The journey east was conducted with the disciplined efficiency that defines special operations movements, a sequence of carefully coordinated vehicle transfers, tactical pauses to verify absence of surveillance, and pre-established security protocols. Each phase had been meticulously planned by Reynolds, with contingency options for potential compromise points. Reynolds has impressive operational planning skills, Blackwood observed as they boarded a private aircraft at a small Montana airfield. The layered transport security, the authentication sequences, the electronic countermeasures, its Cold War methodology updated with modern technology. Sarah nodded, securing her equipment in a specialized compartment designed to defeat scanning systems. He was my father's star pupil in many ways, natural aptitude for complex systems integration, whether it's ballistic calculations or operational security architectures. The aircraft, a modified business jet with specialized communications and defensive systems, departed with minimal delay, its flight plan filed under a corporate cover identity maintained by the Old Guard network. As they climbed to cruising altitude, Blackwood took the opportunity to review the intelligence Hayes had compiled on the detention facility. The Aegis facility presents significant penetration challenges, he assessed, studying the security layout. 3 distinct defensive layers: specialized personnel, comprehensive electronic monitoring. This isn't standard private security. It's a black site operating with governmental-level capabilities. Sarah examined the intelligence with the analytical precision that defined her training. The security director is former Delta, Thomas Reeves. I know him from joint training exercises at Fort Bragg. He's methodical, disciplined, but follows predictable response patterns when faced with specific threat categories, which gives us a potential vulnerability, Blackwood concluded. If we can present a scenario he's trained to respond to, but in a context he hasn't anticipated, we create a window for alternate approach. As they continued developing the infiltration plan, the secure communication system activated with an incoming transmission from Reynolds. Prometheus package secure at primary location. Carter's security advisor confirmed meeting parameters for 0700 tomorrow. Be advised, unusual communication patterns detected in Pentagon secure channels. Possible heightened awareness of our movement. Blackwood acknowledged the update, recognizing the implications. Crawford was mobilizing resources beyond standard private security. He was accessing official channels, which suggested high-level support for his operation. The institutional corruption extended deeper than they had initially assessed. The aircraft began its descent toward a small private airfield in rural Virginia, approximately 30 miles from the suspected detention facility. The approach was conducted with comprehensive electronic security measures active, specialized systems that masked their transponder signature while maintaining necessary safety communications. Touchdown in 15 minutes, the pilot, a former Air Force Special Operations aviator, informed them. Ground transportation is in position, authentication protocols verified, weather conditions optimal for urban penetration operations. As they prepared for arrival, Sarah received an unexpected encrypted communication on the specialized device her father had provided, the last resort channel. The message was brief but critically significant. Eclipse protocol active. Trigger event scheduled 0800 tomorrow. Confirm receipt through established channels. Blackwood studied the message, his expression reflecting immediate understanding of its implications. Eclipse protocol, that's not in the Prometheus files documentation. No, Sarah confirmed, her voice carrying the weight of new comprehension. My father mentioned it only once, described it as a doomsday scenario he'd discovered evidence of but couldn't fully document, something beyond Operation Monarch that represented an existential threat to constitutional governance. The timing created a critical decision point. If the Eclipse Protocol represented a threat more significant than what they had already uncovered, and it was scheduled for activation in less than 24 hours, their operational priorities might need immediate adjustment. We proceed with both operations, Blackwood decided after careful consideration. Chen potentially has the missing intelligence on Eclipse. We extract him, secure that information, and ensure it reaches Carter along with the Prometheus files before the 0800 trigger event. The aircraft touched down precisely as scheduled, taxiing to a private hangar where ground transportation awaited, an unmarked SUV with specialized modifications for both defensive capabilities and surveillance countermeasures. Their transition from aircraft to vehicle was conducted with disciplined efficiency, minimizing exposure time while maintaining comprehensive security awareness. 30 minutes to target location, their driver, another Old Guard network asset, informed them as they departed the airfield. Traffic patterns normal, no indication of unusual security deployments along primary approach routes. Blackwood used the transit time to finalize their infiltration plan, incorporating the new urgency created by the Eclipse Protocol warning. The approach would need to balance speed against security, moving quickly enough to extract Chen before the 0800 deadline while maintaining sufficient operational security to avoid compromise. We'll implement a false flag electronic penetration, he determined, outlining the approach for Sarah. Create the appearance of a cyber attack on their security systems, pattern consistent with known terrorist methodologies. Security response will focus outward and reinforce perimeter positions, creating an internal vulnerability window. Sarah nodded, already calculating timing sequences and movement corridors. I'll handle the electronic deception. 4-minute window should be sufficient for initial penetration, with secondary access point available if primary is compromised. The plan leveraged both their strengths, Blackwood's decades of experience with covert facility penetration and Sarah's specialized training in both electronic warfare and precision operational timing. It represented the perfect synthesis of old-school tradecraft and next-generation capabilities. As they approached the final staging position, Blackwood performed a comprehensive equipment check, verifying weapons condition, communication systems, infiltration tools, and extraction resources. Everything was meticulously prepared, each item selected for specific operational purposes while maintaining plausible deniability if captured. Final authentication from Carter's location received, Sarah reported, checking the secure communication device. Reynolds and Hayes are in position. Senator has reviewed preliminary documentation and authorized emergency oversight protocols. He's prepared to implement system lockdown if we confirm Eclipse represents the threat level indicated. Blackwood nodded acknowledgement, completing his preparations. Time to move. The Aegis facility outside Alexandria presented a study in deliberate contradictions. From the street, it appeared to be nothing more extraordinary than a private research center specializing in defense technology development, a common sight in the area surrounding Washington, D.C. The landscaping was meticulously maintained, the security visible but not ostentatious. The overall impression one of professional competence rather than fortress mentality. But to Blackwood's experienced eye, the subtle indicators of something far more significant were evident. The perimeter cameras featured specialized housings that concealed advanced capabilities. The security personnel moved with the disciplined patterns of former special operations rather than standard corporate security. The building's construction incorporated reinforced materials and specialized access points disguised as architectural features. Definite black site, he assessed as they conducted passive surveillance from a position 2 blocks away. Multiple security layers, specialized personnel, designed to hide in plain sight. Sarah, dressed in business attire that concealed both weapons and specialized equipment, studied the facility through augmented reality glasses that appeared to be standard eyewear but actually provided thermal imaging and electronic detection capabilities. 3 distinct security zones, she reported, her analysis reflecting both training and the enhanced observational capabilities provided by her longbow conditioning. Outer perimeter uses standard commercial protocols, visible deterrence and documentation. Second layer employs military-grade monitoring and response capabilities. Inner core shows temperature and electronic isolation consistent with sensitive containment areas. Blackwood considered their options with the calculated precision that had defined his operational career. Direct assault was impossible given their limited resources and the facility's comprehensive security. Standard infiltration techniques would likely trigger multiple alarm systems. This required an approach that leveraged psychological factors rather than purely tactical advantage. We need to create a scenario they've trained for, but in a context they haven't anticipated, he determined, formulating a plan based on decades of experience with security psychology. Most secure facilities develop response protocols for specific threat categories. The key is presenting a recognized threat pattern that draws resources in predictable directions. Sarah immediately grasped his approach. A false flag operation, creating the appearance of one type of security breach to mask a different penetration vector. Exactly, Blackwood confirmed. Hayes provided intelligence on the facility's security director, former Delta with extensive experience in counterterrorism operations. His training will have established specific response patterns for various threat categories. They developed the infiltration plan with methodical precision, utilizing both Blackwood's decades of experience with security systems and Sarah's specialized training in cognitive prediction methodologies. The approach leveraged a fundamental truth about even the most sophisticated security operations. They were ultimately designed and implemented by humans with predictable psychological responses to perceived threats. At precisely 3:17 p.m., the operation began. From a position carefully selected for both visibility and deniability, they initiated a sequence of apparent security probes against the facility's perimeter systems, electronic intrusion attempts designed to trigger specific alert protocols without indicating a physical breach attempt. The pattern mimicked known terrorist electronic reconnaissance techniques, creating the impression of an intelligence-gathering operation preceding a potential attack. As predicted, the facility's security response followed established counterterrorism protocols, reinforcing perimeter positions, activating advanced monitoring systems focused outward, and initiating communication with federal authorities as required by operating procedures for potential terrorist threats. While security resources concentrated on the apparent electronic intrusion, Blackwood and Sarah executed the actual infiltration through a maintenance access point identified during their surveillance. The entry required both specialized technical knowledge to bypass security systems and physical capabilities to navigate restricted access points, a combination of old-school tradecraft and modern technology that represented the perfect blend of their respective expertise. Inside the facility, they moved with disciplined efficiency, utilizing the building schematics Hayes had provided to navigate toward the secure containment area where Chen was most likely being held. Their presence within the building remained undetected thanks to specialized equipment that masked their heat signatures and disrupted surveillance systems without triggering failure alerts. The inner security zone presented more significant challenges: biometric access controls, personnel monitoring, and specialized containment protocols designed specifically to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive areas. Here, Blackwood employed techniques developed during Cold War operations against Soviet secure facilities, methodologies that exploited human factors rather than attempting to defeat technological systems directly. Security personnel maintained patterns, he explained quietly as they observed a guard station from a concealed position. Even in the most disciplined operations, human behavior creates exploitable windows approximately every 90 minutes. Biological necessities, shift changes, communication protocols. Sarah nodded, already calculating the optimal intervention point based on observed personnel movements. Within 20 minutes, they identified their opportunity, a scheduled security system diagnostic that momentarily reduced certain monitoring capabilities while technicians performed required maintenance. During this brief vulnerability window, they proceeded to the secured detention level where high-value assets would be held for specialized interrogation. The area featured individual containment cells with enhanced monitoring and isolation capabilities, designed not just to prevent escape, but to create an environment of complete psychological control over detainees. In the third containment cell, they found Michael Chen. The young Air Force officer bore the visible evidence of interrogation, controlled methods that inflicted psychological rather than overtly physical damage. Despite his condition, Chen's military bearing remained evident as he instantly assessed Blackwood and Sarah upon their entry, his eyes reflecting both surprise and immediate tactical calculation. "Lieutenant Chen," Blackwood acknowledged quietly, "we're here to extract you. Can you move under your own power?" Chen nodded, his voice hoarse but controlled. "Functional. They've been using pharmaceutical interrogation protocols rather than physical methods. Effects are temporary." As Sarah disabled the monitoring systems and secured their exit route, Blackwood quickly evaluated Chen's condition. The young officer was clearly experiencing the after effects of specialized interrogation drugs, but his cognitive functions appeared intact and his physical capabilities sufficient for extraction purposes. "What did you tell them?" Blackwood asked directly, needing to assess operational security implications. "Nothing relevant," Chen replied with professional certainty. "They don't know I identified the connection between Operation Monarch and Project Eclipse. They were focused on locating the other longbow operators and the Prometheus files." The mention of Project Eclipse immediately caught Blackwood's attention. "Eclipse? Tell me about it." "We received a warning that an Eclipse protocol activation is scheduled for 0800 tomorrow." Chen's expression shifted to one of urgent determination despite his weakened state. "Then we have less time than I thought. We need to move immediately." As Sarah completed securing their exit route, Chen continued in a low, controlled voice. "Project Eclipse isn't about weapons transfers or standard corruption. It's a specialized control system designed to provide unauthorized access to America's strategic defense network. Crawford has spent years placing loyal personnel in key positions throughout the command structure while developing technological backdoors into critical systems." Blackwood processed this information with the cold calculation of someone who understood its implications. Objective: at 0800 tomorrow, Crawford will initiate a manufactured crisis in the Middle East, a terrorist incident against American assets that appears to justify immediate military response. The resulting security protocols will activate Eclipse components throughout the command structure, effectively giving Crawford and his network control over strategic response capabilities. Sarah's expression reflected professional concern rather than emotional reaction. "A shadow coup." "Precisely," Chen confirmed, "not seizing visible government control, but establishing effective authority over America's most critical defense and response systems. The perfect coup is one where most people never realize power has changed hands." The implications were staggering, far beyond the corruption and illegal operations detailed in the Prometheus files. Crawford wasn't simply running unauthorized operations for profit. He was orchestrating a fundamental subversion of constitutional authority over America's most powerful systems. "Reynolds and Hayes are delivering the Prometheus files to Senator Carter now," Blackwood noted, already calculating how to integrate this new intelligence into their operation. But even with that evidence, standard oversight processes would take days to implement, too late to prevent Eclipse activation. Chen nodded grimly, "Which is why we need to reach Carter directly and immediately. As Intelligence Committee Chairman, he has emergency authority to lock down critical systems pending investigation if presented with credible evidence of imminent threat." Sarah checked their exit timeline. "We have approximately 7 minutes before security protocols resume. Full explanation will need to wait until extraction complete." They moved through the facility with disciplined efficiency, utilizing the same security vulnerabilities that had permitted their entry. Chen required occasional support but maintained operational mobility, his specialized training evident in his ability to function despite the lingering effects of interrogation methods. The extraction proceeded according to plan until they reached the outer security perimeter, where an unexpected shift change had altered the predictable patterns they had observed during surveillance. Immediate tactical adjustment became necessary as they encountered a security team proceeding through their planned exit route. Blackwood made an instantaneous decision based on decades of operational experience. Rather than attempting concealment or engaging in a potentially compromising confrontation, he adopted the approach that often proved most effective in secure facilities: the appearance of authorized presence. With the confidence of someone with legitimate access, he guided Sarah and Chen directly toward the security team, producing specialized identification documents that Hayes had provided. Security diagnostic complete, he stated with the natural authority of a senior official. Subject is being transferred for specialized debriefing as authorized by Director Crawford. Confirmation code Sierra Tango 79. The security team hesitated momentarily. The code Blackwood provided was legitimate, having been extracted from intercepted communications, but the situation didn't align with their standard protocols. In that moment of hesitation, Sarah implemented the secondary aspect of their contingency plan, activating a specialized electronic device that triggered perimeter alarm systems on the opposite side of the facility. The resulting security response created precisely the distraction they needed, drawing resources away from their actual location while establishing a legitimate reason for authorized personnel to be moving rapidly toward exit points. They proceeded through the final security checkpoint with the purposeful urgency of officials responding to a potential breach. Their departure registered but not challenged as security personnel focused on the apparent intrusion elsewhere. The extraction vehicle, arranged through Old Guard network contacts, awaited at a predetermined location 3 blocks from the facility. Once secured inside, Sarah established immediate encrypted communication with Reynolds, updating him on Chen's extraction and the critical new intelligence regarding Project Eclipse. Eclipse activation timeline confirmed, she reported through the secure channel. 0800 tomorrow. Specialized control system targeting strategic defense networks. Requires immediate emergency protocols beyond standard oversight procedures. Reynolds acknowledged the intelligence update, his response reflecting the controlled urgency of an experienced operator. Carter has initiated preliminary security measures based on the Prometheus evidence. Will escalate to emergency lockdown protocols with this new information. Proceed to secondary meeting location for unified approach. What the secondary location, a private estate in Northern Virginia owned through multiple layers of corporate entities with no connection to Carter's official positions, had been selected specifically for contingency operations and requiring maximum security. As they approached, Blackwood noted the subtle indicators of comprehensive defensive preparations, specialized surveillance systems, controlled approach vectors, and the disciplined movement patterns of professional security personnel operating under strict protocols. Carter's security is better than I expected, he observed, identifying at least 3 distinct defensive layers around the property. That's not standard congressional protection detail. It isn't, Chen confirmed, his condition improving as the effects of the interrogation drugs continued to diminish. Those are former special operations personnel, Carter's private security team, maintained outside official channels. He's been preparing for something like this for years. The revelation of Carter's specialized security arrangements added another dimension to their understanding of the situation. The senator wasn't merely a potential ally in exposing corruption. He was an active participant in the shadow conflict between institutional integrity and corrupted power, maintaining his own operational capabilities independent of compromised official systems. Their vehicle was cleared through multiple security checkpoints, each featuring both technological verification systems and human assessment by experienced operators. The approach reflected the comprehensive security methodology of someone who understood both conventional and asymmetric threats, layers of protection that complemented rather than duplicated each other. At the main building, they were met by Reynolds and Hayes, who escorted them directly to a secure briefing room where Senator William Carter awaited. At 68, Carter maintained the physical bearing and mental discipline of his military background. His silver hair and weathered features reflected decades of service, while his penetrating gaze conveyed the assessment capabilities of someone who had spent a lifetime evaluating threats to American security. Lieutenant Chen, Carter acknowledged, extending his hand with the respect of one professional to another. Good to see you alive. Your father would be proud of your resilience. Chen accepted the handshake with military precision. Thank you, Senator. He always spoke highly of your integrity. Carter nodded to Blackwood, professional respect evident in his gesture. Master Chief, your reputation in certain circles remains undiminished by retirement. With introductions complete, they moved immediately to the critical intelligence briefing. Chen provided a comprehensive overview of Project Eclipse, its technical architecture, personnel network, and operational parameters. The system had been developed over years, with technological components embedded throughout strategic defense networks and loyal personnel positioned in key decision nodes throughout the command structure. The activation sequence is designed to occur during a crisis response scenario, Chen explained, displaying technical diagrams on a specialized secure system. When standard emergency protocols are implemented in response to the manufactured Middle East incident, Eclipse components will activate in sequence, creating a parallel command architecture that bypasses normal authorization requirements. Carter studied the documentation with the focused concentration of someone with both the technical background to understand the mechanisms and the strategic experience to comprehend their implications. This represents a fundamental threat to constitutional control of strategic systems, he assessed, his expression grave. Not just corruption or unauthorized operations, but an attempt to establish effective control over America's most powerful defense capabilities outside legitimate authority. Can your emergency powers prevent the activation? Blackwood asked, focused on immediate tactical response rather than strategic implications. Partially, Carter confirmed. As Intelligence Committee Chairman, I can implement temporary security lockdowns on critical systems pending investigation of credible threats. But the most effective approach requires physical presence at the Pentagon's Secure Communications Center, direct intervention in the command architecture rather than remote authorization. The tactical implications were clear. Preventing Eclipse activation would require both Carter's emergency authority and physical access to the Pentagon's most secure systems, a combination that created significant operational challenges given Crawford's extensive resources and high-level connections. We'll need to split resources again, Blackwood determined, already calculating approach vectors and security parameters. Carter needs to reach the Pentagon's secure facility with a Chen to implement the technical countermeasures. The rest of us will ensure the Prometheus files reach the full committee regardless of what happens at the Pentagon. Reynolds nodded agreement. Operational redundancy is essential. Even if the immediate Eclipse threat is neutralized, the broader corruption network needs to be exposed through proper oversight channels. As they finalized the operational plan, Hayes monitored the specialized security systems surrounding the property. Movement detected on the eastern approach road, she reported, her voice carrying the controlled tension of an operator identifying potential threat. 3 SUVs, tactical approach pattern, personnel deployment consistent with specialized assault team. Reynolds immediately accessed the property's surveillance network, confirming Hayes' assessment. Aegis tactical team, advanced approach vectors. They've identified our location and are implementing containment protocol. How? Sarah demanded, her tactical mind already calculating defensive options. We maintain comprehensive electronic security throughout the extraction and approach. Internal compromise, Carter concluded grimly, activating additional security systems throughout the property. Crawford has assets I wasn't aware of. Someone with access to my secure communication channels or private security arrangements. The situation had deteriorated from secure planning to imminent assault. They had perhaps 15 minutes before the Aegis team would establish perimeter positions and initiate their breach attempt. The estate's defensive systems would delay but not prevent a determined assault by specialized operators with the resources Aegis commanded. Evacuation protocol, Carter decided, moving to a concealed control panel that activated additional security systems throughout the property. There's a secure evacuation route, Cold War legacy system my father installed during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Underground passage connecting to a secondary property half a mile east. As they prepared for immediate evacuation, a new development changed the tactical situation. Through the surveillance system, they observed Colonel Frank Garrison emerging from the lead assault vehicle, directing operations with the confident authority of a veteran commander. Garrison is leading the assault team, Reynolds reported, his expression reflecting both surprise and tactical recalculation. Appears to be operating under direct tactical control. This confirmation of Garrison's active role created a complex tactical situation. If he was truly compromised and working for Crawford, he would have detailed knowledge of emergency oversight protocols and potential evacuation routes. If he was running a deep cover operation, as some indicators had suggested, his presence might represent an opportunity rather than a threat. We proceed with evacuation as planned, Blackwood decided, recognizing that they couldn't base operational decisions on uncertain assessments of Garrison's true role. Carter and Chen to the Pentagon via the secure route. The rest of us established defensive positions to delay pursuit while ensuring secondary evidence delivery through alternative channels. Carter led them to a concealed entrance within his private study, a reinforced door disguised as a bookshelf that revealed an underground passage when activated. This tunnel was constructed in 1962, he explained as they entered the reinforced concrete corridor, part of a distributed network of evacuation routes established throughout the D.C. region during the height of the Cold War. Most were decommissioned or forgotten after the immediate threat subsided. The passage, a remarkable example of Cold War contingency planning, stretched approximately half a mile from the main estate to a secondary property maintained under separate ownership documentation. It featured reinforced construction, independent ventilation systems, and emergency communication equipment that operated on dedicated frequencies. The Pentagon is 20 minutes from the tunnel exit using the diplomatic security routes, Carter informed them as they moved through the passage. My credentials will provide access to the secure communications center if we arrive before Crawford implements a lockdown. Their group operated according to the operational plan, Carter and Chen proceeding directly to the Pentagon to implement the technical countermeasures against Eclipse, while Blackwood, Sarah, Hayes, and Reynolds established a defensive strategy to delay pursuit and ensure the Prometheus files reached the emergency committee session scheduled for later that morning. Blackwood coordinated the defensive operation with the methodical precision that had defined his career, positioning each team member to maximize their specialized capabilities while creating a coordinated resistance that would exhaust disproportionate pursuit resources. Hayes, you take Overwatch position covering the eastern approach, he directed. Your urban environment expertise makes you optimal for that sector. Reynolds, establish mobile defensive position along the northern vector. Use terrain features to channel pursuit into predictable approach routes. Sarah would accompany him in establishing a central defensive position covering the most likely breach point while maintaining communication coordination with both the Pentagon team and the alternate evidence delivery channels they had established through Carter's trusted committee members. The assault began with coordinated precision, multiple teams approaching from predetermined vectors while employing specialized suppression systems to neutralize the estate's security measures. The attacking force demonstrated the advanced tactics and equipment of elite operators, moving with the disciplined efficiency that Blackwood recognized from his own training of special operations units. Through their defensive positions, they observed Garrison directing the operation with a tactical expertise that had made him a legendary figure in special operations circles. His approach reflected intimate knowledge of both conventional assault methodology and the specialized capabilities of his targeted opponents. He knows we're monitoring, Blackwood noted, observing subtle aspects of Garrison's movement patterns. He's exaggerating certain gestures, creating a deliberate performance for surveillance. Sarah studied the colonel's tactical direction with focused assessment. The approach vectors don't align with standard containment protocol. He's channeling his teams into exposed positions rather than optimal cover routes. The implication was significant. Garrison might be deliberately implementing an inefficient assault pattern, creating the appearance of aggression while actually providing additional evacuation time for Carter's team. It suggested the deep cover operation theory had merit, though they couldn't base their defensive strategy on such uncertain assessment. As the assault teams breached the main perimeter, Blackwood's defensive plan engaged, a sequence of coordinated responses designed to create maximum delay with minimal direct confrontation. Automated systems, triggered ambushes, and precision interdiction from concealed positions forced the assault teams to implement time-consuming clearing protocols rather than rapid penetration. Inside the main house, Reynolds had established a specialized deception operation, creating the impression of a larger defending force through electronic signature manipulation and automated response systems. The approach leveraged his exceptional technical capabilities, effectively multiplying their defensive resources beyond their actual numbers. The combined defensive strategy created precisely the operational window they needed, delaying the assault force long enough for Carter and Chen to clear the evacuation route while maintaining sufficient defensive integrity to permit their own strategic withdrawal when necessary. Carter's team has cleared the evacuation tunnel, Sarah reported, monitoring the secure communication channel. They're proceeding to the Pentagon via diplomatic security route, ETA 15 minutes to secure communications center. Blackwood nodded acknowledgement, already implementing the next phase of their defensive strategy. Time to transition to mobile defense, execute phased withdrawal to secondary positions. The defensive team began their strategic withdrawal, abandoning primary positions according to predetermined sequence, while maintaining coordinated resistance that continued to exhaust disproportionate pursuit resources. Each position was yielded only after extracting maximum delay value, creating the impression of determined resistance while actually executing a carefully planned retrograde operation. As they reached their final defensive position, a reinforced structure designed specifically for last-stand operations, Hayes detected a subtle signal transmitted on a specialized frequency used exclusively by deep cover intelligence operatives. Incoming communication on Black Star Channel, she reported, referencing the classified designation for counterintelligence emergency protocols. Garrison is transmitting directly, bypassing standard command channels. The message, when decoded, confirmed their growing suspicions about Garrison's true role. Eclipse countermeasures active. FBI deep cover operation authorized. Maintain containment facade. Confirms secondary evidence delivery. Garrison is running a sanctioned counterintelligence operation, Reynolds confirmed, his expression reflecting professional reassessment. Likely FBI or Internal Defense Intelligence Agency. He's been gathering evidence against Crawford from inside the operation. The revelation changed their tactical approach. If Garrison was actually working to expose Crawford rather than protect him, their defensive strategy could shift from opposition to coordination, creating a synchronized operation that would maximize effectiveness while minimizing friendly casualties. Confirm evidence secure, proceeding to committee delivery, Sarah transmitted on the specialized channel, establishing coordination with Garrison's operation while maintaining operational security in case of interception. The modified approach created a carefully choreographed confrontation. Garrison's teams maintaining the appearance of aggressive pursuit while actually facilitating the defensive team's strategic withdrawal toward their secondary evacuation route. The assault teams advanced with deliberate inefficiency, creating maximum visible activity while achieving minimal actual penetration. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Carter and Chen had reached the Secure Communication Center, the heart of America's strategic command and control architecture. The senator's position and emergency authorization codes provided access that would normally be impossible, while the apparent urgency of their arrival prevented the standard security protocols that might have identified discrepancies in their hastily arranged credentials. Inside the facility, Chen implemented the technical countermeasures necessary to prevent Eclipse activation, utilizing his specialized knowledge of defense systems to identify and neutralize the embedded components Crawford had positioned throughout the command structure. The system architecture is exactly as I anticipated, he reported through the secure communication channel. Crawford designed Eclipse to utilize existing authorization pathways, but with modified authentication protocols. By implementing a security verification overlay, we can create a temporary barrier that requires physical presence, confirmation for any strategic system modifications. Carter provided the necessary authorization codes and command authentications using his emergency powers to implement what would be officially documented as a system integrity verification protocol, a legitimate security measure given the evidence of potential compromise they now possessed. As the defensive team completed their strategic withdrawal to the secondary evacuation route, they received confirmation that Carter and Chen had successfully implemented the Eclipse countermeasures, effectively neutralizing the immediate threat of unauthorized system access. Simultaneously, the alternative evidence delivery channels had activated, ensuring the Prometheus files would reach the emergency committee session regardless of what happened to their team. Primary mission objectives achieved, Reynolds confirmed, monitoring the encrypted communication channels that provided operational updates. Eclipse neutralized, evidence secured for committee delivery, transition to extraction phase. The extraction proceeded according to their modified plan, with Garrison's operation providing inadvertent cover through their continued assault performance. The defensive team departed through the secondary evacuation route, a concealed tunnel system similar to the one Carter had used, but leading to a different exit point with separate transportation arrangements. As they reached the extraction vehicle, an unmarked SUV positioned at a predetermined location beyond the operational area, they received an urgent communication from Carter at the Pentagon. Crawford has implemented contingency plan. Multiple assault teams converging on Pentagon secure facility. Request immediate reinforcement. The situation had escalated beyond their anticipated parameters. Crawford, recognizing that his primary eclipse plan had been compromised, was implementing a desperate direct action approach, attempting to seize physical control of the Pentagon's secure communications center rather than relying on the technological infiltration they had neutralized. We need to split again, Blackwood decided immediately. Reynolds and Hayes secure the evidence delivery to the committee. Sarah and I will reinforce Carter at the Pentagon. The division of responsibilities again leveraged their specialized capabilities. Reynolds and Hayes had established the committee contact protocols and were intimately familiar with the approach procedures, while Blackwood and Sarah possessed the tactical experience necessary for a potential direct confrontation at the Pentagon. Their vehicle diverted toward the Pentagon, utilizing specialized routes known to Blackwood from his years of classified operations in the D.C. region. The approach required navigating complex security perimeters and identification checkpoints. But Carter's authentication codes, transmitted through secure channels, provided the necessary access authorizations. Inside the Pentagon, they found a facility in heightened security status, not the full lockdown of a recognized attack, but the elevated alertness of a potential security anomaly. Carter's emergency protocols had triggered automatic security responses throughout the defense architecture, creating institutional momentum that Crawford was now attempting to override through direct intervention. They reached the secure communications center to find Carter and Chen in defensive position, having implemented the Eclipse countermeasures, but now facing imminent assault by what appeared to be a specialized security team operating under Crawford's direct authority. Crawford has activated a contingency assault team, Carter informed them, his expression grim but determined. Former Delta operators now employed by Aegis, operating under cover as Emergency Security Response Unit. They've convinced Facility Command that we represent a security breach rather than legitimate oversight. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Crawford's team would breach the secure communications center within minutes, potentially reversing the countermeasures Carter and Chen had implemented while eliminating witnesses to the attempted coup. We need a direct approach to Crawford, Blackwood assessed, recognizing that tactical defense alone wouldn't resolve the fundamental threat. As long as he remains operational, he'll continue implementing contingency plans regardless of how many individual attempts we thwart. Carter nodded agreement, his expression reflecting both determination and concern. But he's not here. He's operating from a secure facility at Aegis headquarters, directing the operation remotely while maintaining plausible deniability. Sarah had been studying the facility schematics displayed on the secure communication system, her specialized training allowing her to identify critical vulnerabilities in Crawford's approach. There's another option, she stated, her voice carrying the cold precision of a tactical assessment rather than emotional reaction. The Eclipse countermeasures have created a temporary window where strategic systems require physical presence verification for any modifications. She turned to Blackwood, her expression reflecting the weight of what she was proposing. If we can access the external observation platform on the Pentagon's east section, I can establish a direct line of sight to Crawford's position at Aegis headquarters. Range is approximately 1,800 meters, with complex environmental variables, but within longbow operational parameters. The implication was clear. Sarah was proposing a precision engagement against Crawford himself, a shot that would require the extraordinary capabilities developed through Project Longbow to have any possibility of success. The ethical and operational implications were profound, representing a fundamental decision point that would define their entire mission. That's not a shot anyone can make, Carter stated, his expression reflecting both skepticism and calculation. The distance, the intervening structures, the environmental variables, it's beyond any reasonable operational parameters. Not for a longbow operator, Chen countered, his expression reflecting professional assessment rather than emotional reaction. The project was specifically developed to enable precision engagement beyond conventional limitations. Sarah's capabilities exceed standard operational parameters by significant margin. Blackwood studied Sarah's face, seeing in her eyes the same resolute determination he had witnessed throughout their journey. The composed confidence of someone who understood precisely what they were facing and the principles at stake. "Your call," he said simply, recognizing that the decision represented a defining moment for both their mission and her personal journey. Sarah checked her specialized risk computer, calculating the complex variables that would affect such an engagement: wind patterns, temperature gradients, atmospheric density, structural interference vectors. Her mind processed these factors not as discrete challenges, but as an integrated mathematical model, the methodology her father had pioneered and she had perfected. "I can make the shot," she stated with quiet certainty, "but we need to create a diversion that will draw Crawford to a specific position within the Aegis facility, a location with sufficient structural transparency to permit a clean engagement." Carter considered the proposal with the grave assessment of someone who understood its full implications, not just tactical, but ethical, legal, and constitutional. "This represents extraordinary action outside standard oversight parameters," he noted, his expression reflecting the weight of the decision. "But we're facing an extraordinary threat to constitutional governance itself." The senator made his decision with the clarity that had defined his career. "Implement the operation. I'll provide the necessary authorization under my emergency oversight powers, accepting full responsibility for the consequences." With the decision made, they moved to implement the operation with methodical precision. Chen coordinated with friendly elements within the Pentagon security structure, utilizing Garrison's counterintelligence channels to create a controlled confrontation that would contain Crawford's assault team without triggering full facility lockdown. Meanwhile, Blackwood and Sarah proceeded to the external observation platform on the Pentagon's east section, a position that would provide the necessary line of sight to the Aegis headquarters while offering sufficient concealment for a precision engagement operation. Carter established communication with Crawford through official channels, creating a deliberate conversation that would position the deputy director at a specific location within the Aegis facility while providing legal documentation of his involvement in the attempted coup. "I know about Eclipse, Alex," Carter stated through the secure communication system, his voice carrying the authority of his position. "The system has been neutralized. Your assault teams contained and the evidence secured for committee review. This ends now." Crawford's response carried the controlled confidence of someone who believed they still maintained operational advantage. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Senator. Eclipse is just one component of a much larger architecture. The system has evolved beyond your capacity to contain it." "Then perhaps we should discuss this directly," Carter suggested, implementing the conversational direction they had planned. "I'm prepared to meet at a neutral location to explore potential resolution before this escalates beyond either of our control." The conversation continued along predetermined lines, with Carter deliberately maneuvering Crawford toward the specific office location they had identified as optimal for Sarah's engagement. The deputy director's arrogance and belief in his operational superiority made him susceptible to the subtle psychological direction Carter implemented, gradually positioning him precisely where they needed him. On the observation platform, Sarah had established her position with the disciplined precision that defined longbow methodology. The specialized rifle, a modified Macmillan TAC-338 with advanced ballistic compensation systems, was braced against a stable support structure, while her mind calculated the complex variables that would determine success or failure. "Wind patterns variable between here and target," Blackwood observed, providing environmental assessment based on decades of experience with precision operations. "Primary vector northwest at 14 knots, secondary disruption patterns from intervening structures, creating microturbulence corridors." Sarah nodded, integrating this information into her comprehensive calculation model. "Atmospheric density gradient shifting with temperature variations between ground level and target elevation. Coriolis effects significant at this distance, requiring 1.7 MOA adjustment from standard." The engagement represented the ultimate test of Project Longbow's capabilities, not just exceptional marksmanship, but the integration of advanced physics, atmospheric science, and neurological conditioning that allowed human operators to achieve what conventional wisdom considered impossible. Crawford is in position, Carter confirmed through their secure communication channel. East office, standard position behind a desk, structural transparency confirmed through thermal imaging. Sarah made final adjustments to her position and equipment, her breathing slowing to the controlled rhythm that had become second nature through thousands of hours of specialized training. Her heart rate decreased to the optimal range for precision engagement, while her mind processed the integrated mathematical model that would guide the shot. Sending authorization code now, Carter transmitted, implementing the final element of their operational plan, an official oversight authorization that would provide legal documentation of the engagement as a legitimate security action rather than unauthorized operation. Sarah's focus narrowed to the perfect integration of body, mind, and equipment that defined longbow methodology. Her fingers settled on the trigger with precise pressure, her breathing synchronized with the subtle environmental rhythms that would affect the bullet's flight, her mind calculating the exact moment when all variables aligned for optimal probability of success. The shot, when it came, was almost anticlimactic in its precision, a single controlled release that sent the specialized projectile on its extraordinary journey. The bullet would travel for approximately 8 seconds, covering the 1,800-meter distance while being affected by dozens of environmental variables that Sarah had calculated with mathematical precision. Through her specialized scope, she observed the impact with the clinical detachment of a professional operator rather than emotional reaction, a precise effect that neutralized Crawford without excessive force or collateral damage. The shot had been calibrated for incapacitation rather than elimination, striking with just enough energy to render the deputy director unable to continue operations without causing life-threatening injury. "Target neutralized," she reported, her voice carrying the controlled precision that had defined their entire operation. "Immediate threat contained." Carter's response came through the secure channel with equal professional control. "Aegis security has been contained. FBI counterintelligence teams are implementing facility lockdown and evidence preservation protocols. Crawford is in custody along with key members of his network." The immediate crisis had been resolved, but all of them understood that the broader conflict would continue. The systematic exposure and dismantling of the corruption network Crawford had established throughout the defense and intelligence communities. That process would require months of careful investigation, institutional reform, and constitutional oversight to complete. "The emergency committee session begins in 1 hour," Carter informed them as they secured their equipment and prepared to depart the observation platform. "Reynolds and Hayes have delivered the complete evidence package and are preparing to testify regarding Operation Monarch and Project Eclipse." Blackwood nodded acknowledgement, already planning their approach to the committee session. The operational phase had concluded successfully, but the institutional phase was just beginning. The formal process of exposing corruption, implementing accountability, and restoring constitutional governance principles. As they departed the Pentagon, Sarah paused briefly, looking back at the massive structure that symbolized both American military power and the constitutional principles that governed its use. "My father believed the most important battle wasn't against external enemies, but internal corruption," she observed quietly. He said preserving constitutional governance sometimes required extraordinary actions from ordinary people who understood what was truly at stake. Blackwood placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of professional respect rather than personal reassurance. "Your father would be proud, not just of your exceptional capabilities, but of your commitment to the principles he valued above all else." Together they proceeded toward the Capitol building, where the emergency committee session would begin the formal process of exposing Crawford's network and implementing institutional reforms to prevent similar corruption in the future. The mission had tested not just their operational capabilities, but their fundamental understanding of the oath they had all taken to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. 6 months later, a small gathering assembled at Arlington National Cemetery. The spring sunshine cast long shadows across the immaculate grounds as a military honor guard conducted a formal ceremony at a previously unmarked grave, now bearing the name rank, and service dates of Colonel Frank Garrison. The subsequent investigation had revealed Garrison's complex role in the conspiracy, not a willing participant, but an FBI deep cover operative who had infiltrated Crawford's network years earlier. His apparent cooperation had been a calculated deception, designed to gather evidence while limiting the damage Crawford could inflict. His final act, deliberately exposing his true role to warn Blackwood's team during the estate assault, had cost him his life, but potentially saved the nation from a constitutional crisis. Senator Carter stood with solemn dignity as the honor guard performed the ceremonial flag folding. Beside him, Blackwood, Sarah, Reynolds, Hayes, and Chen formed a small semicircle, the surviving operators who had exposed the conspiracy and prevented the silent coup that would have fundamentally altered American governance. Garrison understood the fundamental principle that defined his service, Carter observed quietly as the ceremony concluded. That loyalty to the Constitution sometimes requires standing against those who have temporarily gained control of its institutions. Blackwood nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing of the emotions beneath. He made the impossible choice, appearing to betray his oath while actually fulfilling its deepest meaning. After the ceremony, they gathered at a small reception in a private room at the officers' club. The formal investigation was ongoing, with Crawford and several key conspirators facing charges of treason, while dozens of compromised officials throughout government and military structures had been identified and removed. Project Longbow had been placed under proper congressional oversight, its extraordinary capabilities now subject to constitutional constraints and ethical guidelines. The Senate has approved funding for a specialized training program, Carter informed Blackwood as they stood slightly apart from the others. Precision engagement specialists operating under proper oversight and ethical constraints. They've requested you consider directing it. Blackwood raised an eyebrow, surprised by the offer. I'm not exactly known for embracing institutional oversight, Senator. Carter smiled slightly. Precisely why you're the right person. You understand both the capabilities and the dangers. You've seen firsthand what happens when specialized skills operate without proper constraints. Across the room, Sarah was engaged in conversation with Chen and Hayes, the surviving Longbow operators discussing the technical aspects of the program's future development. Despite the trauma they had experienced, all three had chosen to remain involved, committed to ensuring the technology their fathers had helped develop would serve its intended purpose rather than being weaponized for personal advantage. She reminds me of her father, Blackwood observed, watching Sarah's focused intensity as she explained a technical concept to the others. The same brilliant mind combined with unwavering principles. She's been offered a position as technical advisor to the Oversight Committee, Carter noted, ensuring the science remains transparent and accountable. Robert would be proud. As the gathering concluded and they prepared to return to their respective roles in the reconstructed program, Blackwood found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the isolated Montana outpost where it had begun to the halls of power where it had culminated, the mission had tested not just their operational capabilities, but their fundamental understanding of the oath they had all taken. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of cherry blossoms, Washington's annual reminder of renewal and continuity. The city spread before them, the Capitol dome, the monuments, the visible symbols of governance that represented not just power but principles. Principles that had been preserved not through institutional perfection, but through the actions of individuals willing to stand for founding values when systems faltered. Later that afternoon, Blackwood and Sarah visited Robert Mitchell's grave in a small private ceremony. Sarah placed a single white rose on the headstone, her composure momentarily yielding to the grief she had held at bay throughout their mission. He used to tell me that America's greatest strength wasn't its military or economic power, she said quietly. It was the willingness of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when principles were at stake. Blackwood nodded, understanding the profound truth in Mitchell's assessment. Throughout his career, he had witnessed that phenomenon repeatedly, individuals choosing difficult right over easy wrong, standing for constitutional values when institutional pressures pushed toward expediency or self-interest. Your father's legacy isn't just the technology he developed, Blackwood observed. It's the example he set. The understanding that scientific advancement without ethical guidance becomes a threat rather than protection. Sarah brushed her fingers lightly across the engraved name on the headstone. He always said the final shot wasn't fired from a rifle. It was the decision to stand for what matters most, regardless of personal cost. As they walked back toward the barn, Washington's monuments visible in the distance, Blackwood realized the profound truth in that assessment. The final shot hadn't been Sarah's precise engagement against Crawford, impressive as it was. It had been the collective decision of a small group of individuals to stand for constitutional governance when corruption threatened to subvert it from within, the ultimate expression of the oath they had all sworn to defend America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. In a world that changes with bewildering speed, Blackwood observed as they departed the cemetery, some values remain constant: loyalty, honor, truth. Sometimes preserving those values requires someone willing to take the final shot, regardless of the cost. Sarah nodded, understanding the profound continuity that connected their generations despite the technological and methodological differences that separated them. Different tools, different techniques, but the same fundamental commitment to principles that transcended both. In the end, that had always been America's greatest strength, not weapons or wealth, but people willing to take the impossible shot when everything that mattered hung in the balance.